So time to make a start. So this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The recording of the meeting will remain online for 4 years, and if you are present in this chamber, you are consenting to appearing in the recording and broadcast, which may also be used for training purposes. Before we enter the substantive part of the meeting, as members can see, we have a very busy agenda this evening with lots to get through. Please could I request all members of the committee to keep your questions succinct and direct, and remind Cabinet members and officers in attendance to proceed directly to the answer. Again, keeping them concise and relevant, please. I want to ensure that we get through all items on the agenda this evening in order to give all members the chance to speak if they would like to. Okay, I hope that's very clear. Okay, thanks for listening and hopefully paying attention to that. So I'm going to ask my colleague to help me out here, Lauren. So apologies, we've had apologies so far from Councillor Bell, with Councillor Alistair Chambers attending as a sub. Any other apologies, please? So I think I'm supposed to put the apology in for Kate Highland. Oh, you were there. I couldn't see you earlier. In that case, scrub that bit. Okay. Angela? Kate's here. Okay. So going on to the agenda, not knocking the water over. Item 51, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, sure.
For item 10 on the agenda, I'm a member of the board of Gloucestershire Airport.
Any other declarations of interest? Declaration of party whipping. Any party whipping going on? No. Silence is a no. Minutes of the last meeting. Is it okay if I approve those as an accurate record, please? All those in favour? Any against? Nope, that's good. Public question time, 15 minutes. On this occasion, we have no questions from the public. Petitions and deputations, 15 minutes. 5 minutes. And that takes us on to item 7, the financial update. Before we move on to that, I'm not quite sure what the word is, whether I congratulate you or welcome you as your first meeting as our monitoring officer. So welcome's probably a nicer word. So welcome. Hope you're not going to have to be too firm with us this evening. So we're all going to be well behaved. I think I was caught out. I didn't realise that Jane Cryer was leaving so soon. I thought she was going to be here this evening, but she's gone. I understand. Tanya, is there anything you'd like to say as well by way of introduction on your role and the fact that Jane Cryer's left?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm here tonight in my capacity as Policy and Governance Manager, as an advisor to the meeting, the same way as other officers here this evening. From tomorrow, I will be acting monitoring officer until Jane Cryer departs the council in February, at which point I will take up the role of interim monitoring officer.
Okay, yeah, I think her out of office at school today intimated that she'd already left. But if you say you don't take over until tomorrow, that's cool. Updated financial position. Looking for Alison and Declan. Would you like to take your places, please? What we'd like to do at our pre-meeting, what we thought we'd like to do is take the 3 different sections of the report one by one, Declan, if that's okay. So we've seen these reports at council and the special council meeting. So principally take them as read and then invite questions, if that's okay. You okay with that, Declan?
Yeah, absolutely, because I wasn't sure what I was going to say, really, because it's been through the Emergency Council members briefing and Cabinet. So I'm pretty sure you don't want me to hear me go on saying the same stuff all over again. for a third or fourth time. So that's absolutely fine, yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. So I don't know if you'd like to ask any questions, if you have any points, Alison? To follow on from Declan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the report has been through Cabinet, it's been
Yeah.
through Council. I've had quite a lot of discussions with members individually about the report, so here to answer any other questions that you may have.
Okay, thanks. So we're going to take the one headed out.
Just, can I just put in there, one change that has happened since the emergency meeting is that the EFS application has gone in, and I think it's been, is it validated or verified by MHCLG on Wednesday? So that's we've progressed that far really. So, and that's where we are as of now.
Follow all of that. My hearing's still not too good. Do we know when we'll get a decision, one way or the other?
So the process is that our application went in on the 19th of December, and then we get allocated somebody to do an assurance check. So we have that on the first check on Wednesday. We won't know the final outcome of their application until, well, probably just before our tax set meeting, our council meeting in February, because it has to go through quite a process. But all the discussions we've had so far have been quite positive, but we won't know the actual outcome until probably February time.
So do we know who the inspectors will be talking to, will be meeting here at the council? Will it be elected members, Declan, for example, and the leader, or?
So it's not an inspector. It's so the government appoint. They've actually appointed SIPFA to do a assurance check of all of the applications. So they'll speak to all the Section 151 officers from every authority that's put an EFS in. It's sort of a technical assessment of the figures.
So I'm going to open up to questions and comments on the first part. Terry, Alistair, who wants to go first?
Thank you.
Right, come on, let's get moving on.
Thank you, Chair. I was hoping the Managing Director would be here to answer some questions as well, given that yourself, Alison, wasn't in post during a lot of this period happening, and also yourself, Declan. But given that he's not here, I'll list the questions to yourselves. Thank you. You approved a budget in February 2025 forecasting a 126,000 increase in reserves. Yet by Q2 you were forecasting a £2.5 million deterioration. Who specifically signed off the assumptions that they're wrong, and what professional consequences have followed?
You're talking about the budget for the current year? Yeah. Well, these were the numbers that have been provided for the last 4 or 5 years on the same basis. You know, as members, we have to take those numbers at face value. They're prepared by officers, and you know, we have every right to expect that they have, you know, basis in. They're a true reflection of what the accounts actually say. So, you know, personally, the first year that I was doing this job, I was presenting reports all along, which I now know were wrong. So that doesn't make me feel particularly good. But we know now that when we took over, the accounts were really in such a mess that we didn't even know ourselves that we were probably already, sort of, well, I don't know whether or not bust is the right word or not, but certainly our general fund, the reality was it was less than zero. And we continued on our course, not knowing that in fact was not the case. And it was only until we got our new head of finance here and I asked her to prioritise clearing up all the old accounts that we started finding out that there were some things there that everybody was unaware of and should have been aware of. If I'm honest, there are all sorts of reasons why that happened, but it's a sort of nightmare situation nobody likes to be in. And I must say that I find it all personally quite distressing, the fact that we've we've been presenting these numbers that we know went wrong, but I'm also quite angry at the fact that the accounts were such a mess in the first place. So when we took office, we had a commitment that we would clear all of this up, and we are clearing it up. But we're finding things that are very uncomfortable for everybody in those numbers. So as far as I'm concerned, I want us to do as deep a dive as possible. If there's bad news in there, I want to know it, and I want to bring it out into the open, because we have to sort this out, and we are sorting it out, but it means that we're going to have some difficult times ahead. So it's just, there's nothing more I can say about it right now, except that this is a position that we should not have been in.
Given reserves are already negative by 4.3 million, why should members of the council and also members of the public have any confidence that the £2.6 million forecast is not materially understated, as per the previously forecasts that they all have been understated?
Well, we've brought in experts to go through, and this is the reason why this has all taken so long. And they have done a very thorough job, and the reason why that we're not yet in a position where we can produce a budget, although we're getting close to it now for next February, is that we must make sure the priority is to make sure that we've got a good starting base, that we know exactly where we are now. We've got a base budget that's starting from the right opening balances, and that's what we've done. But of course, it means that for some years now, we've been operating beyond our means without realising it. So we're taking this hit now, but it's something that has to be done, and it's something I'm determined that we are going to do, because we have to be confident in the numbers that we've got. So we've been in discussions with our auditors. We've brought in people from CIPFA, that's the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountants, the professional body. And we've also we've also taken help from the Local Government Association and who have looked at the finance department and whether or not we're over or under resourced. And we will have a report on that shortly as regards how they recommend that we resource the finance function in future. And one of the priorities I'm going to make sure is that finance is properly resourced, and we have the capacity to do this properly in future, because it seems to me that in the past we've been under-resourced. The cyber attack didn't help, but that was the time when we should have brought more resources in to fix it. And unfortunately, as each year has gone on, it's got gradually worse and worse.
You stated in your answer then that you know where you are now and you've got the experts in, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
So can you give your word now to all members that the financial position will not change?
That's a hostage to fortune. I am confident we are. We've finally sorted it all out now. But I cannot absolutely give you 100% guarantee that something else isn't going to come out. But from what I can see, we are safely, we do now know that we are to a good, firm, solid starting position. But, you know, I'm almost too scared to say that, yes, that's it. We're absolutely, this is, we sort of have, we've now pulled all the skeletons out of the closet. I'm pretty certain that we have. I don't see any reason to doubt that. But it's the old saying, never say never. But I'm confident, well, I'm reasonably confident that we are in the right place now. But it's not a particularly comfortable position for all of us, unfortunately. But, you know, as I said before, this is where we find out how serious we all are in dealing with this. And I'm hopeful that we will all start working together, make the difficult decision to get this council back on a firm footing.
Thank you for clarifying that you know where you are, you've got the experts in, yet you can't give your word that the financial position is not going to get any worse.
No, I am confident that we are. But, you know, given what's happened, I'm always reluctant in case something else might be lurking around, but I can't think anything, I can't think of anything else that could possibly come out now. I think this is it. Yeah, I would say I am confident that we are. We sort of have bottomed out what our true starting position is. So, you know, the emphasis now is really just moving forward and looking forward.
What elements of this financial position would not exist had the council been competently managed? And which of these failures are now being masked by an EFS application?
Well, that's a counterfactual. I can't say that. I don't know. You know, thinking back, you know, maybe we all should have been asking more questions at the time. But having said that, we were getting reports that, you know, we had every right to expect were accurate and reliable, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. So I've forgotten what the question was now. What was the question?
What elements of this financial position would not exist had the council been competently managed? And which of those failures are now being masked by an EFS application?
I think had we been working on more accurate figures, and say, for example, the cyber attack hadn't happened, we would have been in a difficult position, but we would have known about it some years back, because I think one of the big issues is the rise in interest rates and how we've been accounting for our commercial properties. We would have had less resources on a year-by-year basis. So we would have had to make tough decisions earlier, but arguably they wouldn't have been quite as tough as they're going to have to be now. So, you know, we would be back. I think that you would have to sort of think about all the projects that we have started over the years and whether or not we would have done that had we known that the finances weren't quite as healthy as we thought they were. So you would have to sit and work all that out, but it's almost like a sort of rewriting history exercise. It's a counterfactual. It's hard to tell really what could have happened if we'd have known earlier on. But all I can say is that in all of these things, the earlier you know about them, the better. And had we known when we took over that we were already in a negative balance situation, it would have been better than finding out about it now, because we've not had another couple of years of drift really. So I think had we known about it earlier and had the reports been accurate, we would have been in a better position today. I think there's no doubt about that, but we would have been a smaller organisation probably.
Thank you. And what service cuts, asset sales, council tax decisions or government controls have been modelled as conditions of EFS? And why are members not being shown these scenarios? Now, we've been shown a few, but not all of them. When are we going to know the full sort of outcome of what's happened?
To Alison, sorry. You know, I'm definitely getting old, you know, and this is not a good sign. But Alison, yeah, if you could.
So part of the EFS application is that we have to have a recovery plan. So you've seen the very draft recovery plan at a high level, which is in the report in front of you today. So the work now is to work on more detailed scenarios for that recovery plan, and that includes asset sales, so capital receipts to pay off the borrowing or avoid having to actually take the EFS borrowing. And it will also include things like looking at fees and charges to increase income through that method. So that is in the recovery plan, that is in the report, but it is at quite a high level. We need to work on the detail of that now.
I've got more questions, but I think go around the room first. Chair, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, Councillor Wilson, I'm concerned that you're coming across unnerved and nervous in this situation. Look, with a number of people here, I've sat on this scrutiny committee for years, and we've been given quarterly outputs, which we've believed in best faith to be absolutely correct. We now find out that they were only best estimates. This committee's been seriously misled. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, we've got this report here. How do I know, how is the committee comfortable that actually what is in here is factually correct? Because I'm not feeling that.
Well, you know, in the sense that I suppose the sort of confidence comes from the fact that we know that we've dug through all these. So you will have the confidence because from this point onwards, we will be doing proper reconciliation and all the balance sheet accounts is what we've not been doing in the past. And everything will be tied back to the actuals on a month-by-month basis, as recommended by the auditors. And that on its own will give you confidence that the numbers are correct. The fact that what tends to happen is, particularly with balance sheet accounts, is that, and I'm sort of going back to my experience in the aerospace industry, working on long-term contracts. We used to have these big, huge accounts, what's called suspense debtors. Because contracts are so long, we take the sales as we go year on year, but we don't necessarily invoice and take the cash. But we have to be able to reconcile those back when the auditors come along and say, this is exactly what this is now. This will be the case now. So when you look at a balance sheet account, you will be able to see that this is what's in that balance sheet account. And I think one of the problems was we had issues such as service charges that were not really collectible, but they were sitting in the balance sheet. So we had to sort of take those out and write them off. And one of the reasons why I've got such a big adjustment is here, there's a lot of historical adjustments that we've had to make that have been sitting there really undetected in the balance sheet. So we're clearing all of that out. So the fact that we're doing all of this should give you more confidence that going forward, the numbers will be more true to life, if you like. As long as it's all properly reconciled, and this will be something that the auditors will look at when they come in, I'm pretty certain. So the fact is that we haven't really had a proper audit of our accounts for years because there's been a crisis. I mean, this isn't just this council, there's been councils all over the country. There's been a crisis in the audit industry because, as we know, we got rid of the audit commission, handed it over to the private companies, and they didn't have the capacity to do it. And then COVID didn't exactly help either. So when you have a normal audit, the auditors will come in and they will look at all those balance sheet accounts and they will demand to see evidence that they are true and fair balances. And if you give them a list of debtors, etc., they'll want to know, well, how can you prove that this is really collectible? And the same with creditors as well. So you would have to, they would pull out random samples and you would have to prove that those are, proper debtors and proper creditors. And the same with fixed assets as well. So once we get back to proper auditing, which is happening, and as you know, the government, they sort of declared that all outstanding council audits had to be cleared up and they had to be disclaimed audits, which basically is just them coming in, having like a few balances and signing them off. It's not really a serious audit. That won't be happening in the future. So the auditors will be back in doing their proper audits and checking all of this. So that will also give you further confidence in the accounts. So my sort of slightly, I suppose, nervous reaction when Councillor Chamber asked his question is just given past experience. You sort of think, oh, hostage to fortune here. But when you actually think about it, as long as we've got the proper systems in place, we will be able to do it properly and you will be able to see these are proper, decent accounts. Anything that's not should be flagged up by the auditors, and I'm sure they will be doing that in future. And one thing you can be certain of is the next time we get a proper full audit coming in, given the history of the last few years, they will be looking at us particularly closely, and that's a good thing. So I think those are the areas where you can have more reassurance.
Thank you for that. I mean, I guess the answer to that is we will see. Time will tell. Okay, can I touch, and Alison, thanks you. You mentioned the recovery plan. Haven't seen any terms of reference for the recovery plan yet, so I assume they will be produced. Group leaders, I understand, are expected to sit on the recovery plan, on the recovery board, but it goes back again to faith, trust and honesty. And that's in very, very short supply, frankly, at the moment. So you know, how can we be sure that the recommendations that the Recovery Board are making are the right ones? We need faith, trust and honesty. And I'm not sure whether that's there at the moment.
Okay, I guess, I mean, I totally understand your comment, but we're putting together, we've got to put together a recovery plan that the MHCLG have got confidence in as well, that we can deliver as part of the EFS application. So it's within all of our interests to work together on that and for it to be as open, as transparent as possible. And you're right, the governance arrangements, and we haven't finalised any governance arrangements yet. What's in the report is as far as we've got in terms of the governance arrangements. It will involve members as part of that implementation board, I think we've called it, whatever name it is, because it's really important that we all work together to get these delivered. But we are, you know, there are going to be some difficult decisions that we're going to have to put through because we are in a difficult financial position. But the intention is for us to work together on it. But we've got, you know, you've got professional officers, as in me, as in Andy as head of place, that are professional in our areas. So we will make recommendations to you that we think are the right thing to do to get us into a better financial position.
Okay, thank you. But thank you also for recognising the frustrations that people sitting on the Recovery Board may have. Could I just have one more, Chair? Thank you. And it's a slightly different tack. It's about quarterly monitoring, and every quarter we get, you know, the detail and what the overspends are and what the underspends are. And I just wondered how that works. What is the mechanism in bringing that information to us? Is that something that members of the finance team produce, or is it information that individual budget managers produce? How are those figures arrived at? Thank you.
Sorry, is that me? No.
That's it, yeah.
So since the cyber attack, there has been very little engagement with the actual budget officers in terms of producing those monitoring statements. To start with, it was because there was no finance system and it was all done on spreadsheets, and that's been really slow to get the budget monitoring process back up in place, because before the cyber attack, it was working quite well. We've just reintroduced the budget monitoring process from Q8. And we've allocated a finance officer to every single area to work with all of the budget officers. So we've just started that. So the quarterly monitor that you'll get, I guess that'll be Q3, and I'm not quite sure exactly when you'll get that yet, because the timescales are slightly different to what they were when we set the timetable this time last year. That will have a quarterly monitor that is put together by Hadrian, but with all of the information that comes in from the budget officers, meeting monthly with the service accountants. So that has been lacking, and that was picked up in the statutory recommendations from EY. But we'd already acknowledged that, to be fair.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful, because just for me looking into the pot, that seems to be where there has been some, the word for it is weakness in the system, without any shadow of doubt. So, I mean, if there are significant underspends predicted, yeah, what actually happens then? What does that budget manager do if, for example, and I'm just picking the cemetery and crematorium because that's coming in at a predicted 499k overspend this year. What actually happens then to that individual? You know, what does that individual budget manager actually do with that information, and how do the council and finance team and budget managers work to rectify that, so that when we come to the end of the year, that overspend is levelled out?
So what should happen and what will happen going forward is that the monthly meetings are happening with the budget officer. And if there are any, so the finance officer will take along what the figures look like. They will talk to the budget officer about, you know, if we use crematorium as an example, the income is below what's projected. They will talk to them about that. You know, is that because there's a seasonal variation that hasn't been built into the figures, or all that sort of thing, or what's the reason for that? If it truly is not achievable, then we would have to come back to members and ask for a additional budget to be put in place. But that would be the last resort to do that, because that would be taking money from balances to do that. So you would have your monthly meetings, and you wouldn't do that until you got to a position where it's just not achievable. The budget is not going to be reached.
So Terry, you're just one more question. That's triggering into about another 25. So can we move on?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, fine, thanks. So we've got Councillor Stephanie Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, Declan, your introduction sort of purports that most of all this money is to do with before you took office as the Cabinet. And I have quite a few queries. I've got the figures, I would say, in black and white, but they're mainly in red in this over the last 4 years here. And without you know, we haven't got the time to go through these line by line here today. But that isn't what these figures indicate at all. So that's my main concern. There was obviously lots of money spent on the LGR proposal, etc. So I think it's a little bit underhanded to try and put everything onto the former administration. That being said, you've also said today that, yes, this committee has been misled with the figures. So not only this committee, but this Cabinet, your Cabinet, the subsequent Cabinet have been misled. Therefore, do you think it would be a good idea to instruct forensic accountants to come in and do a thorough investigation and go through everything line by line?
Let me start with the comment about, I think what I said was we were already bust when we took over, but nobody knew. If you look at the September report, that's after the 1.5 million issue emerged that went to full council. It had our general fund down to just £130,000. If you then take into account the 24-25, the first few months of that year were under the Conservatives, so even the 4.3 million, you would have to allocate some of that to that when you were still in office. That would take you into negative territory. If you look at the report that's gone before overview and scrutiny tonight, the first section about really setting the scene, really, paragraph 4.1, final outturn position, it talks about historical transactions, which is what we've been doing with SIPFA. And then look at the report that was our response to the statutory recommendation. It talked about getting back on track. The team have been working on ensuring monthly reconciliations are back in place for bank reconciliations, creditors, debtors, and balance sheets codes, which effectively says is us saying that we weren't doing that. And we are finding a lot of issues that are historical, that go back from the time that we took office. Having said all of that, I would prefer that we start looking forward. The only reason that I thought that should be highlighted was that a post appeared in the Gloucester Conservative Facebook page said Lib Dems bankrupt council after only 18 months. And I had to put on record that actually we probably already were in that position before we took office. Just the accounts were such a mess that nobody knew. I wasn't going to say any of that, but I felt I had to set the record straight. But having said that, I take your point that a lot of these reports we were all accepting in good faith, and we need to sort of put all of this to one side now and look forward. As regards your question about forensic accountants. Well, yes, absolutely. But right now, where we are, I mean, I'm not particularly interested really in working out how much of this was before we took office and how much of it is after, because that's my priority is to get the EFS application in, and my priority is to get the budget sorted for next year. And my priority is to make sure that we have all these systems in place to make sure that something like this can't happen again, and we have good, proper accounting practices back in place, is what we should have had from the beginning. We can then sort of look back and go through this in more detail. But right now, I want to put out the fire before I start the investigation of why the building went on fire in the first place, if you like. So I take your point, and your comment as regards forensic accountants, etc. Yes, that is something that probably we should be looking at, because really, if I'm perfectly honest, I want these answers as well, because it hasn't been a particularly enjoyable experience for me either. So, but you have to sort of put these things in the right sequence, and the sequence is get the EFS in, get the governance arrangements around that, get out of this mess, make sure we got all the proper accounting systems in, the proper reconciliations, all the checks. So when auditors come in, it's a fairly routine matter because it's all done already. I want to get all that in place, and then we can sort of check back and see what on earth went wrong in the first place. So these things are all perfectly fine, and I agree, but I just want to make sure they're done in the right order.
Thank you for agreeing it would be a good idea. I think I definitely disagree on the sequence of events, really, in that I think it's really important that our finance team work day to day in getting everything right now, as the team have been recently. But to have somebody independent come in and go through that urgently would be my word on it, absolutely urgently, would be really, really vital. When there be other lessons that we can learn from that haven't even been established yet. I'm not interested where those things lie, you or us, whatever. It makes no difference. We are all accountable to the public, and our public trust is at an all-time low right now. And I think the sooner we can be accountable and get that public trust back and show the public that actually we are looking into everything and we are going to find out where this money was spent and what's gone on and what has gone wrong, because there's no doubt things have gone wrong. I would really like to see that done. And it's not our officers doing the work then, they can make sure we're not falling behind now. So I would really like, Chair, to raise that as a formal recommendation that this committee writes to Cabinet. And I can word that a bit better if you want, Chair. So, sorry, just trying to open up what I wrote on this. So what I'd really like as a formal recommendation, Chair, is that the Cabinet, that this committee, if they agree, writes to the Cabinet to immediately instruct independent forensic accountants to investigate where the council funds have been spent, for them to be used to ensure complete transparency and get to the root cause of the problem. And this to be done in parallel with any inquiries commissioned into the conduct of anything else that has gone on. External advisors to ensure independence, and for this to be done in a way that's tightly managed for cost, time and independence, and then that the Cabinet can work with the Section 151 officer, one legal and group leaders and chairs of the Scrutiny and Audit Committee to ensure the forensic accountants are fully appraised with all the views of the members.
So are you formally moving that?
I'm formally moving that, please, Chair.
Okay. So, Councillor Pullen, I think you wanted to come back. You're going to second that?
Yes, I'm more than happy to second that, and thank you for putting those words together. What is at stake here is public accountability, and the only way that we are going to establish public accountability. Public want to know what has gone wrong, why it went wrong, who was responsible for it going wrong, is to bring in some financial experts, as you've just described, to look at it. And that can run alongside whatever your work that you're doing now. And we don't know what that will throw up. You know, your nervousness about what else is in there may come up as well. So I'm absolutely behind the proposal that's been pushed forward. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak in favour of that or against?
Yeah, on behalf of the independents, I think that's a great proposal, and thank you, Councillor Pullen, for seconding that. I think that forensic accounts is the only way, independent forensic accounts, not the mockery of the Lighthouse report that was not a formal audit report. It was just an advisory memo. We don't want any nonsense like that. We want a proper forensic, detailed accountability of what's happened, how it's happened. And so we don't get this big bailout of £17.5 million and find that the same thing in the same situation in 2 years' time. So I think that's really, really well said. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree that I think we need this. I guess my question would be, does the finance team currently have the capacity to support this in addition to all the work that's already underway?
No. My honest answer is no, we don't, because the priority at the moment is the EFS application. It's gone in, but there's still quite a lot of work that I'll have in terms of going through the assurance, and I've got a budget to set by the end of February, which has got to be my priority, rather than looking back at what's happened. We did ask SITFA when SITFA came in, or SITFA have been in helping us, so they have been going through the 24-25 accounts to make sure there was nothing obvious there in terms of sort of due diligence exercise. They haven't been through every transaction, which is, I think, what you're proposing, but they have done a sort of due diligence exercise. But I won't have the time to work with anybody until we set the budget, which is the end of February.
So I'm slightly unclear what you were saying there. So you're saying you don't have the resources to initiate this independent inquiry?
I think the question I was being asked is whether we would have the resources in the finance section to work with anybody coming in to do a forensic inquiry. I think that's what I was being asked. And what I'm saying is at the moment, the finance team are concentrating on getting the budget done, which has got to be done for the end of February. So we've only literally got 4 weeks probably for all the papers to be done. So that's got to be the priority at the moment.
But okay, so after the end of 4 weeks, you're saying that that's fine, we can pick this piece of work up. And I understand, all of us understand the urgency in getting the next year's budget out.
I'm saying when next year's budget's set, then I think I'll have more resources to, but bearing in mind, we're trying to keep on track with getting the statement of accounts in line with the statutory requirements. So the 25-26 statement of accounts, if we're going along with the statutory requirements, need to be published by the 30th of June. So there is quite a lot of work that we've got to do to maintain that. So we have got quite a lot of work we're doing. I'm pretty sure I'll be coming forward asking for additional finance resources as part of the LGA review that we've commissioned. So, but getting those resources in place, that's just one part of it, asking for additional funding to get the resources, that then I need to get the resources in place. So, you know, at the moment, I haven't got those resources to do that extra work.
I'm personally very conscious of the fact that the longer we delay it, memories fade. People can't quite remember what happened, and it's happened in this authority quite a bit. The staff that we need to talk to find another job somewhere else, and there's another issue that we need to consider. So, Alistair, you were trying to get in as well.
Thank you, Alison. I appreciate that response. Would you suggest, though, when resources are there, that it would be a good thing to bring in? Because obviously Declan suggested a good thing. Councillor Pullen does, Councillor Chambers. Would you suggest it would be something that would be good to see how it so happened, what's went on? But obviously not at this exact moment in time, but when you've got resources available.
I guess for me, my priority is looking forward, not looking backwards. But if that's what members want, resources to be put towards them. It's members' decision, but my priority is definitely about moving forward, getting the budget monitoring processes in place, getting the statement of accounts done, because my view is that the situation we're in is because we were so far behind with everything.
Thank you. So on that basis, obviously we've got Declan, Cabinet Member for Finances, saying that he's suggested it'd be a good idea as well. Councillor Chambers and Councillor Pullen, and also myself and the independents. I think that it's worth looking into that, because time can take a long time to go to tender, instruct a forensics accounting company, get tender responses from them, pass that to Cabinet. That can take months anyway, so we'd be probably well over the dates that their resources would be free. So I think it'd be worth maybe making a start with that process.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, this isn't necessarily a new request. I believe requests have been going on for independent investigations for quite some time, prior to us even members knowing about it. And I haven't gone back and got the exact terms of reference, but what the Lighthouse report wasn't independent. A recommendation went through council some time ago, after September. So this isn't new recommendations. Okay, we've phrased it now as a forensic accountant, but the council was asking for an independent review of everything that's gone on, and that was before we knew about the bigger ask and the greater situation that we're in. I understand the importance of looking forward. However, I find it very difficult to look forward with the lack of trust that members have currently. How you're going to form and have trust in a recovery plan until we and the public know what's gone on. So I would still say there's some urgency, but as Councillor Chambers also said, these things do take time. So by the time the legal team and everybody start to look at what this means, we meet together, we meet with people, by the time they're in here to do the work, I imagine we are going to be some weeks down the line and resources will be freer. And if necessary, despite this council being on a very, very tight budget, there's certain things that I've noticed. In September, this council spent £10,000 on just renewing their membership to cathedral cities, for example. You know, those things aren't urgent. That doesn't give us a huge priority. I think the priority is finding out what's gone on. Yes, we can move forward, and hopefully your team can do that work on moving forward while these forensic accountants come in and go through everything else. Now, I understand that will take some of your time, but if you could explain how much extra resource that's going to take of yours, and to the Cabinet can also understand how soon that resource can be available, if they need to get anybody else in sooner, I think this should be an absolute priority of this council.
Okay, thanks for that. So is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this specific issue of asking the Cabinet to instigate a forensic inquiry? Owen, we've got you on the list, but we've also got people above you. So Angela, you are next.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to talk about the forensic issue, although allied to skeletons in the cupboard, we might wish we hadn't started digging.
Can I just hold for a second, because I'm keen to progress this idea of a forensic inquiry and then put that to the vote.
I'll come back later.
Come back to you. So looking at trees and helpful notes, Owen, I think that says.
Thank you, Chair. I agree that looking back would be helpful, but we cannot write a blank cheque to get this done. If this proposal goes to Cabinet, could we also make sure that there's some kind of limit on how much money we're going to be spending on looking backwards? Because we need to spend money on making sure that we have proper systems in place, that we don't get into this position again.
But I'm not sure we have that information just at the moment, do we? What it's likely to cost. Steph.
Can I just say that in the recommendations, I did mention that we do tightly manage cost, time and independence.
Yeah, I forgot that, and that's a very important part of the wording. Councillor Owen? That's a very important part of the wording of the recommendation.
And I know that those words were said, but tightly, it doesn't quantify it.
But that's the best we can do at the moment in the absence of any further knowledge. So we're taking Anne next, and Radley.
Thank you, Chair. My point was very, very similar in terms, we as an organisation, this committee can't commit resources, but I have no idea what resources would be needed in order to look at a meaningful forensic investigation. So I was hoping if perhaps officers could give some sort of estimate of what it would take for that to be done in a meaningful way, what additional resource you would actually need from your finance team in order to support that, and overall, how long that work would potentially take us, and when that could be done in a way that would give us something that's actually useful, bearing in mind your focus is getting us out of the mess that we're in now, so we don't get in a deeper mess by not actioning the things we need to action.
It's a really difficult question to answer because it will depend on the scope of the forensic review. I mean, the going rate for sort of that type of work is about £1,000 a day you could be paying. But I really don't know how many days that it will take. It will depend on the scope and how much detail. I mean, if you want every line of expenditure looked at, but you know, if you want it done in a lot of detail, that's going to be quite a lot of days, I would suggest. It's really difficult to tell, to be honest. Apologies.
And then what support would your department need to be able to provide in order, because if a consultant arrives, an external individual arrives, you can't just sit them at a desk and say, crack on. You have to support them, you have to enable them, you have to work with them. What potentially would be the cost of that?
Well, the way I'm sort of viewing it is it would be like an audit. And there is quite a lot of officer resource that goes into being audited, because you have to provide information from the system or access to the system. If you provide access to the system, you'd have to provide training on how to use it. So we would probably have an officer having to work with that accountant, not necessarily one officer, but an officer working with them for quite a lot of the time, I would suggest, to make it meaningful.
And if this recommendation goes forward, when do you think would actually be a most appropriate time for that forensic work to actually take place?
I think the work can take place any time. It's about when we would have the resources, but I think we would just have to put this piece of work along with everything else we've got in terms of what we need to do, and then I'd have to say to you that this is the additional resources we need to be able to facilitate either this or getting the statement of accounts done along with the statutory framework, carrying on with the budget monitoring, etc. So that would be in that list of resources that are required.
Excuse me, my take on this is that Councillor Steph Chambers has got the right words in there to say that it's not a blank cheque. And I think that councillors who follow on from us, hopefully not for a long time, will wonder why on earth we just locked the door and threw the key away and didn't take the time and trouble to work out how we got into that mess. It's the biggest financial mess, obviously, this council's ever had to work through. And I think it's regrettable just to lock the door, throw away the key and say, not our problem, we're going to look forward. I think that's irresponsible, and I think it's not why we were elected. So I think we've got to have some faith that we don't have like a shopping list and we can put into Google and say, we want a forensic inspection in Gloucester, how much is it going to cost us? We've got to have some faith in the Cabinet, do their best to work with the director and see what comes back. But this is the first stage in getting the process moving along, and I think it's the right first step that we should take. I'll put it to the vote in a minute because I think we've discussed it quite a bit. Steph, yeah.
I just wanted to say that if we don't do this, I mean, we've all been following the public opinion online and letters and phone calls we've received or people we bump into in the shops wanting to know what's gone on. We really risk losing public trust forever, because at the moment, because we don't know and we can't answer those questions, the public speculation is going wild and we can't answer them. Until we can answer them, we risk that going on for years to come. And people aren't going to be happy in investing in Gloucester, in coming to Gloucester, in running businesses and paying their council tax when they don't know where their money's going. So I think it's really, really important.
Mr. Chambers, and then we'll try and move to the vote, I think.
I'll say the bottom line is, if this council was a company, its directors would be under investigation for wrongful trading. Why should this authority be treated differently, and who ultimately takes responsibility for the financial collapse which is now unfolding? I think we need this investigation.
Steph, just quickly, can you outline what you're proposing? Then we'll put that to the vote.
Okay, so it's that this committee writes to the Cabinet to immediately instruct, we don't know when that will take place depending on resources, but we hope it would be soon, immediately instruct independent forensic accountants to investigate where council funds have been spent, for them to be independent to ensure complete transparency and get to the root cause of the problem, to be done in parallel with any other inquiries that are taking place, to proceed urgently and to work with the Section 15F officer, one legal and group leaders and the chairs of scrutiny and audit to ensure the forensic accountants are fully appraised of the views of members.
That's very clear, isn't it, I think? So are we ready to move to a vote?
Sorry, I missed out the bit about being tightly managed for cost, time and independence.
That's important.
The important bit, yeah.
Okay. So is everybody okay in what we're voting on? Yeah? So everybody...
Could I propose an amendment just to the part that says should immediately instruct? I'd like to propose that we amend that to be as soon as feasibly or as soon as reasonably possible.
Nonsense by tomorrow.
Mine is to immediately instruct, but that doesn't mean they're going to be in now.
Okay, so we are going to take a vote. So those in favour of the way forward that Steph Chambers moved and Terry Pullen, Councillor Pullen seconded, please show. Okay. That's almost unanimous. I don't think members of the public can vote, but thanks for showing you're still watching us. So, okay, that's obviously carried. Is there anybody against or are you abstaining? Okay, and there was nobody else, was there, who didn't support it? That's really good news. I'm really pleased about that. Is there anything else on the first part of the report before we move on to appendix? I think what it is, appendix A. Is there anything else before we move on to appendix A? If not, we'll move on to appendix A if we can, please.
Sorry, just to clarify, Chair, is that moving on to the Lighthouse report now?
No, appendix A is the, I'm trying to find it again. It's the, I think it's appendix A. Or maybe it's not, maybe it is the, yeah. So anything on appendix A, or otherwise we'll move on to the Lighthouse report.
So, Chair, I did have a question before Stephen James' proposal.
Okay. Yeah, apologies.
No, you took one of the proposal.
Okay. Yeah, oh, sorry.
Thank you. That's why my name appeared twice in front of you. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wilson mentioned this was something new, which frightens me. Surely, if you're in charge of public money, you routinely reconcile and check what you're spending, check what's coming in. We shouldn't rely on auditors for people to do the right thing when no one's looking. We should have the right systems in place. So what I heard earlier was that we used to use Excel spreadsheets to control our finances rather than proper software that would manage our finances. It just seemed as if things were chaotic in the past. Is that, did I hear that correctly?
Not quite. In the aftermath of the cyber attack, there was a lot of manual accounting was being done. And I guess a lot of that would have been on Excel spreadsheets, etc. But we repopulated the finance system sometime in 2024, I think.
It was 13 months.
Yeah.
There was 13 months of running the council with manual spreadsheets and transactions. We had no other way of doing it, but we kept the payments and we kept the council going.
Yeah.
We have then had to take that data and repopulate it into the finance system. That was onerous in itself. Anybody that's ever done it will attest to that. And you can go and ask people at Co-op, you can go and ask any of, but it's been cyber-attacked. So that was what was happening. So yes, it's not the ideal scenario. It was never the ideal scenario, but it was the only way to keep the council going without shutting it. And that's the honest answer.
I have often described it in the past as it is the equivalent of being bombed back to the Stone Age as regards finance systems. When something like that happens to you, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I do have some experience of this sort of operation that I've been in charge of installing new ERP systems in my old day job. And that involves transferring data from the old systems onto the new systems. And this sort of data migration, believe me, it is an absolute nightmare. And I do have some sympathy for what Hadrian is saying here. It is a terribly stressful thing to have to do, particularly with the volume of transactions that we would have had to have done. So so we weren't as such we were relying to a certain extent on spreadsheets, but it was more or less, it was more transferring the data into the new system that we had to set up after the cyber attack. The issue about reconciliations is that in normal times you would expect to have reconciliations every month, and that's how you do things. It gives you the confidence that when you get to the end of the year and the auditors come in and they'll say, well, here's the balance sheet. Can you show me what's in that balance sheet? You just produce the reconciliation and you can back it all up and you explain what it is. And that makes the year-end audit nice and easy, at least in theory. And that's what we're getting back to. But the situation as regards, because of all the manual transactions that had to be done, the data migration that had to follow from that, there was I think I wasn't personally involved in it, obviously, but it sounds to me like there was an issue with some of the balances, some of the accounts that we weren't entirely sure what they were as a result, because transactions can sometimes go to certain accounts where they shouldn't. So that's the challenge that the finance team have had in the last 4 years or so. And as I said, I think we finally got to the bottom of it now. So at least that's sort of the silver lining, if you like. But the solution to all of this, and the key to all this, at least in my view, is regular reconciliations. So that really all that says is just gives you details of what's in every single account. That's easy to follow and auditors can look at.
Okay, so I'm going to chip in and see how good your memory is, Declan. Going back to the time that I was a cabinet member for housing and planning, I got in touch with you as the chair of audit and said, I'm not too sure I understand the records that have been given to me around Section 106 agreements. And I think we might have a problem, and I'd like internal audit to take a look. As a member of another party and the chair of audit, can you just take a look at the figures? And you said, yeah, Drew, I think you've made a case for doing some work around this 106 agreements. And so that should have been an alarm bell for all of us, that the record keeping in that part of the city council wasn't what it should be, and that there were flaws. It was seriously flawed. That took months and months and months for internal audit to produce their final report, which was very serious and quite damning. So we were aware before you lot, sorry to be that disrespectfully, you lot, your party took over. You were aware, you personally were aware, that there had been issues around record keeping within a small section of the City Council. And I refer to this because you were talking about reconciliations, and if I can find the right paragraph, which I can't, I'm annoyed now, But the one paragraph that I can find is talking about spreadsheets. It talks about the use of spreadsheets, which can be manually intensive and have a heightened risk of data inaccuracy, including a lack of an effective audit trail, should be stopped. Should be stopped. That was in 2021 as a result of the inquiry that I requested. I found the bit about reconciliations. Regular reconciliations between the 106 officer spreadsheet, uniform, Excom housing projects and strategy team leader and general ledger records were not performed before or after the cyber incident, in brackets, high priority. So Declan, you were aware of that. You were privy to that. You were very helpful when I was trying to get this all looked into. And the report that was produced, it looks as if we learned nothing from it. No reconciliations, no data, incomplete records. So 4 years on, I've got to be careful what I say, but 4 years on, the lessons learned in that inquiry haven't been fully appreciated and move forward, which is one of the reasons I was very happy that we decided to go for a forensic review of where we are currently, because the lessons learned from this 106 report were not learned. And I think I was, and probably still am, the only cabinet member who ever came to you and said, I think we've got a problem in my portfolio. Or the other cabinet members were saying, well, there's nothing wrong with my portfolio. I don't want to turn it up poking around in mine. But I came to you and I said, I think we've got an issue. And that work was very intensive, went on for a long time. At one point, I thought it was going to be completed after the local elections in 2024. And I'd never see the outcome, but we managed to get speeded up. But you were aware of it, and hopefully you'll agree with virtually everything I said. It was a serious piece of work, and it was a very serious piece of work. It's quite hard-hitting, actually, and it's just a shame that the opportunities it gave us there to learn and revise our ways of working wasn't really with any great relish taken up. So that was my brief introduction, my brief comment on the 106 report.
You'll be surprised to learn that I do remember that. I remember it quite well. But what I remember about it was that the issue there was that different officers had different lists of Section 106 agreements on different spreadsheets, and none of them agreed with each other. It wasn't part of the double entry accounting system, which is what I'm talking about. So, and we have sorted that out now, and there's this one list of Section 106 agreements, I would hope that they are reconciled to what's in the balance sheet as well. So it wasn't to do with double entry accounting, so that was outside the finance function, but it is a good example of whereby different people keeping different records, having no centralized system can then lead to problems. And I think in the end, we came to the conclusion that the worry was that I think there was something like up to 180,000 of Section 106 we hadn't claimed, but it turned out that wasn't the case. I think there was around about 10,000 or something. It was something relatively not as bad as we expected, but that wasn't part of the finance systems as such. It was different officers, again, keeping different records and nobody agreeing which one was right. But we did sort all that out and it's all centralised now. So some good did come out of that.
But there were financial issues tied up in all of that. There were issues of underspend, there were issues around trigger points, and there was the awful prospect that we may well have to give money back to developers because we'd missed a trigger point, and the whole thing was a nightmare and took a long time to resolve. But it's disappointing, Owen, that the lessons weren't learned. It's seriously disappointing.
That's why we brought in a system called Excom, which standardised and centralised it all.
Isn't tongue in cheek? It's a serious question. So issues are the mechanisms that you have for dealing with all this, like Excom and the other ones I mentioned, are they available to scrutiny members to look at occasionally to see where we are with them? Or is that going to be another one where scrutiny gets the door slammed in his face?
I've absolutely no idea, but we can find out. The honest answer to that is, Andrew, I don't know, but I'm sure if you were to ask, it would be provided, because it is an important document, that, because we're always interested in what Section 106 agreements that are still waiting to be claimed. So I don't see there should be an issue there.
Okay, just make sure that last sentence was captured by shouldn't be an issue. I'll be in touch, Declan. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair, just to dip in, I believe those regular reports already go to the planning committee on the Section 106 agreements. I believe they're 6 months.
What I was asking about was like being able to access Exacom and these other tools that you use.
That could be, I suspect that's a licensing issue.
Look, okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Declan, you've stated that reconciliation's key. Reconciliation. Why is it that in the Lighthouse report it states that reconciliation accuracy is not planned until Q3 of 2026?
Because it's telling us our account system is broken. So, which is what this is a situation that we've had the last 4 or 5 years, which is why we're fixing it. I mean, we're bringing in the recommendations from the auditors as per the statutory recommendations, and that's one of the things that they highlighted as well, if you read that report. So in our response to them, we've made it clear that we're making sure those reconciliations are now going to be done. And it's a point that I've been making all along, that accounts reconciliations are absolutely key to everything. So this report here is looking, as we are now, looking into the sort of the near past, if you like, and it's highlighting what we've also been told by the auditors, which is why we've agreed the action plan to make sure the proper reconciliations are now done, and I'll make sure they are done.
Thank you very much. You've used words, we know where we are now, we've got the experts in, you just used the words, we've fixed it. If you fixed it, you know where you are, you've got the experts in.
I think when I said we fixed that, was referring to the Section 106 issue that Andrew was talking about.
No problem, but you've used words, we know where we are, we've got the experts in, and reconciliation is key. I again ask the question, why wait till Q3?
We're doing it now.
Okay, so you need to re-establish with the Lighthouse report, because in the Lighthouse report it says that the independent assurance of reconciliation accuracy is not planned until Q3 2026.
But we're in Q3. Yeah.
Yeah.
'25, '26. So we're in the last quarter, which is the 26th part of it. So we've just started Q3 now.
It's financial year, not.
I got me, sorry about that. Right, so questions I've got. Why was it not a formal audit report? Why was it known as an advisory memo? That gives no assurances to the public. The Lighthouse report is basically meaningless because it's not an official audit report. So the document explicitly states it is not a formal internal audit report. It's been downgraded to an advisory memo. And so why was that? Who downgraded it?
It's not been downgraded. It was an advisory piece of audit work rather than being when you give it an assurance level, so reasonable, limited, whatever. It was an advisory piece of work, the same as the review into the car boot sale was an advisory piece of work. It's quite normal practice.
Thank you. But what raises concern is that it was given without prejudice. So whoever raised it and the report can't be taken to court. It can't be held accountable. The document was given without prejudice, and it states that in the report.
don't know what you mean and be taken to court. It's an independent review of with the scope that was given. It's an independent review. I'm not understanding your point.
I think
There you go. So what I'm saying is the Lighthouse Consulting was commissioned to give advice without prejudice. So how can members and the public have confidence in the objectivity of the findings when the work was not subject to formal audit standards, ratings or mandatory recommendations? So without prejudice means it can't be used in court.
I think all consultants' reports or auditors' reports say that, but I would need to check.
Given negative reserves, repeated forecast failures, disclaimed audit opinions, why was a full internal audit report with formal findings not commissioned, and who made that decision?
What do you mean, sorry, and wasn't commissioned? An internal audit report of what?
Why was a full internal audit report with formal findings not commissioned? So who made the decision to downgrade it to a memo without prejudice? Whose ultimate decision was that?
Oh, I've already said that it's normal practice to ask for it's not a formal audit. What we asked for was an independent review with the scope set from the cabinet recommendations. So we didn't necessarily want whether the outcome was reasonable, limited in terms of an audit assurance. We wanted an independent review of recommendations in terms of the scope that was set.
Would you say, though, that the governance, the gaps are no consequences? For example, the memo identifies governance with oversight gaps, so saying there's been governance with gaps missing in the accountancy and all the financial reports. Yet there's no further actions required. How can we take this report seriously?
That was the outcome of the independent review. So that's not me reviewing it. That's what the independent review came back with. If you as members are not happy with what the independent review is, then you may ask for another one, which is exactly what you've done, isn't it, in terms of a forensic review?
Yeah, I think ultimately the ultimate question is if this council was a regulated financial institution, its directors would face investigation for governance failure. So why should local government leadership be held to a lower standard where millions of pounds of public money are involved?
That's almost a philosophical question. It's still a question. It's local government finance. Well, it depends which way you look at it. It's local government's part of government as a whole, and one of the reasons why central government doesn't like local councils getting into trouble is because it adds to government debt overall, and then they don't like to publish those in their figures. But if you sort of look at all government accounts, you really have to add up all the local governments, the fire authorities, the police authorities, various government departments all over, and you've got pluses and minuses all over the place. So I mean, we're just one part of the whole government machine. For every minus is a positive somewhere else, but it's a big, long, complex web, really. But it's just, I agree with you that, I think the cyber attack was a big issue. We didn't deal with it as well as we should have done. But we're not supposed to be run as a business as such. We're supposed to be there to provide services to residents. So, and there are restrictions what we can and cannot do. So a business would be able to make more commercial decisions than we do. So it's not really the same thing.
You mentioned the cyber incidents, for example. Why were outdated servers, outdated software applications, which were already known vulnerabilities to the council, why were these not addressed earlier, and who deprioritised them?
you're going back to the previous administration back in 2021. I can't, you would need to ask really who was in charge then.
I'll bring that back to, it's unfortunate the managing director is not here again to answer some of these questions, because it's impossible to have true overview scrutiny when questions are being answered by people, which I appreciate your thing, Alison, and also Declan as well. Trying to answer questions that they weren't in post. It makes a mockery really of the whole scrutiny. How can you scrutinise something with people that weren't in post? Chair, I appreciate this is not your doing, but I just believe the managing director, who is overall is the managing director, should be here to answer these questions.
I thought he was going to be here. I'll go through my emails tomorrow. I thought he was going to be here. Maybe I misunderstood that, but that was my impression.
I've got other questions, but I'll let other people take questions. Thank you.
So we've got Louise back to this side of the room, then Angela.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I mean, Councillor Chambers has just touched on the one point I was going to ask, actually. But it is, in the report, it says, paragraph 3.8, that asset management and infrastructure resilience was not embedded, leaving vulnerabilities unaddressed. I don't know if that refers to, as it says, out-of-date applications or perhaps legacy systems. But can you give any assurance at all that these have been addressed or in the process of being addressed? Because I'd like to think, if heaven forbid there was another cyber attack, we would be somewhat more resilient to it in future.
As far as I'm aware, the members of the council, either in the prior administration or this administration, have had a report by our head of transformation and IT, Ian Stark, that covered everything to do with the cyber incident and actually referred to how the systems have been rebuilt. And as far as I'm aware, I'm talking second hand here, so just bear that in mind. That report, basically, everything we've done has been done in conjunction with GCHQ's National Cybersecurity Centre, and we've rebuilt our systems as robustly as we can. Anybody that's witnessed the last year or the last 4 years, once you've been cyber attacked and done it, you get an algorithm that tells you everything that's happened. And you've heard about the major ones, Co-op, Marks and Spencer's, etc. Even airports. It's not really feasible. You can put as many IT controls in as you want. You will still are subject to potential for attack. But my understanding is that we are in as the best position we can be. But that's, as I say, that's me. You've all had a report, or if not, you can refer to that report, and I'm sure Lauren can provide that to any member that wants to see it. But as I say, that came from the head of IT and transformation.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and track that down. Just one more point then. In paragraph 4.1, it does also refer to the issue that there were a lot of staff movements and staff going on long-term sickness leave. Again, presumably a lot of work has been done to make sure that, as you said, essential critical functions are now documented, so that if somebody does leave, doesn't work the notice, or suddenly goes on sick leave, I appreciate that a member of staff going off, there isn't always the possibility to do a handover. So hopefully there are now systems in place so that there's a smooth transition if somebody does suddenly leave.
There are systems in place. I would say it's still very much work in progress, because we are under-resourced in finance. So we are working on making sure that we've got systems notes for everything, and we've got, where possible, people covering roles. So it's not just single dependency, but it is still work in progress, I would say.
Yeah, I should add, that's a very good point. It's important that all these processes are documented, because I know that was always a big issue in any particular roles that I had back in the day, as you say. So, yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Louise, so we've got, look at Tree's writing, sorry, Angela, and then Anne. Angela. I beg your pardon, sorry, Steph.
Thank you, Chair. You said much earlier that you are now doing quarterly balances or reports. And you're doing the 8th one. Is that right?
Sorry, quarterly finance reports, but reconciliation should really be done monthly.
So has that ever been done before? Was it being done prior to the cyber attack, for example, and not afterwards?
I'm being told by Hadrian to my right here, yes, they were done beforehand, yeah, before the cyber attack.
Thank you. A lot of people have been saying, where has this money gone? I'm looking at it from the other point of view. I think we know how it's been spent. It's been spent on events, extras, functions, the cremator possibly, the equipment that sorts at the Ubico depot, that sort of thing is where the money's gone. What people aren't saying really is where has it come from, but the Lighthouse report does explain that it's optimistic commercial incomes, unexpectedly high interest rates, disappointing returns from commercial property, and that sort of thing. But I think that needs to be clarified to the public, that officers were spending legitimately money that they thought we had, but we didn't have it. But the record showed that we did have it. People seem to be suggesting there was deliberate intent to spend money, to overspend, or maliciously. And I don't see that at all. If you're given the wrong information, you think you've got X thousand pounds to spend, you will spend it. And I think most officers were doing their job properly in spending money that they thought they had. Would you agree?
I think that's a fair summary. I wasn't sure if this was going to sound too bland or not, but it's the 5th of January, the last day of Christmas decorations. I was trying to compare it to Christmas Carol. The Ghost of Christmas Past is getting into the mess in the first place. We're at Christmas present where we're sorting it out. And when people talk about where's this missing 17.5 million, that's the Ghost of Christmas future, what will happen if we don't take action now. I think it's an issue of certain balances ended up in the balance sheet and they should have been in the revenue account. And that's the reason why we're in this mess now. So it gave them the wrong impression of what we had to spend, and we need to fix that. There's sort of all the rumours, etc., about where's all the money going, etc. It's just that the accounts that we weren't, a lot of the accounting wasn't being done properly, primarily because we got into a mess in the first place after the Russian attack, and it's just taken too long to untangle it all. And that's where we are. So we want to avoid the Ghost of Christmas future, if you like. I don't know if that's a good way of explaining it or not, Andrew, but it probably isn't. But
things being explained very clearly, but I think we're skipping a couple of generations here. I think my goddaughter would love it, but there you go. No, Declan, you finished telling us about Christmas future and past and all that stuff. That's cool. Okay, who asked that question? I can't remember.
That was Angela.
Angela, you okay with that? Okay, that's cool. So we've got Anne and Steph, and I think that's about it. After that, Steph, I think it's a wrap.
Thank you, Chair. It's obvious that Declan and the wider team, you've done an awful lot of work, and there's been a heck of a lot that you've had to go through to try and get to where you are now. I keep thinking about good old Donald Rumsfeld and Rumsfeldian logic, the known knowns, the unknown known, the known knowns knowns. And at least you're further into the uncertainty envelope now, and there's less unknowns than there was, but there's still a great deal of uncertainty. Now, sometimes when you're dealing with uncertainty, you fall back on your professional doctrines, your professional etiquettes. So I don't understand the term that you've kindly used, which is tied back accounts. Tied back actuals, I think was the term you used. No, I've heard that wrong. No. It was tied back accounts. No.
No,
I've scribbled that down incorrectly. So, again, it's those professional bodies, professional ways of doing and being. In terms of some of the problems we had, it seems that some of that was due to lack of documentation, perhaps, ways of doing and being. You mentioned Ian and our IT function. Do we have membership of any of the IT professional bodies? Because I know that they teach and hold ways of working and knowledge to try and be more efficient. I think it's ITIL, which is one of those professional bodies. Do we know if we have those that are aware of these? I think this knowledge originally came from local government, so it might, those ways of doing and being might be useful for us.
I would imagine we possibly do. I just sort of, when you were speaking there, and one or two questions, and I said, "Are you absolutely sure? No, you've got everything, etc., etc." I was thinking of that great philosopher Mike Tyson, who once said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." And I'm just wondering if there's something else going to come along. But I don't think so. But you know, as I say, I'm trying to think what that term was, but unfortunately, I don't know. That's okay, don't worry.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something here. You know, I have never indicated that any officers have been doing deliberate spending like Councillor Conda stated. The point is we don't know, and I don't know how Councillor Conda claims to know where all the money is, because I've got the figures here and I don't know, and I don't think everybody does know. I don't think Declan knows. I think that's why we all agree there needs to be some forensic accounting done in this. For instance, we've been eating into our reserves unknowingly. We've been spending levering up funds that we have ring-fenced for certain things because we haven't known where our position is. So we have been spending where we don't know it is. And yes, there have been pressures that we do know, but we don't know that that covers exactly. So, for instance, there was new machinery needed at the crematorium. There was some at the recycling centre. We know those things, but we don't know the exact figures. We don't know what else has been spent. So we do need that to be clarified. And I think it's really important. And I think the Lighthouse report, the one thing that it does state is that we need a good, clear communications plan for public, can't remember how it phrased it, but basically for public trust to be restored. And I think I do want to raise that I think our communications plan, particularly our online communications of the City Council, arguing with members of the public on Facebook, blocking members of the public with no accountability. I don't know why they've been blocked. They maybe said something out of order, I don't know. But I don't think our communications plan is working. And I think that needs to be addressed urgently. And the Lighthouse report does mention that. So I think that's something to really, and I have written to the leader of the council explaining how upset I am with our communications and how they're being dealt with. So I hope that is addressed soon. And another point I just want to make is it's good we're getting to the bottom of this and the work's starting and we're getting through it. But I think we need to acknowledge as well that officers didn't, you know, the finance people doing the accounts have just been doing what they can. And this has been raised by members in that team themselves, that they're not happy with how things are being done. So I don't think they are hiding anything. I think my concern is with the overall management and how long this has gone on, that we've been doing these lack of reconciliations, eating into reserves and eating into other ring-fence funding needs to be addressed at a higher level. I have got no issue with the officers doing the accounts and doing the work. I think they've been doing the best they can in very difficult circumstances, particularly with the cyber incident. So I don't want that to be saying that I'm saying they were deliberately spending. I think it's system failure, and it needs to be addressed urgently.
No, well, I think, I'm not sure there was a question there, but they're valid points, which I take note of. And so, okay, that's.
Sorry, the only question is really, if I phrase it better, what's your view on the communications that have been going on, and do you think they should be improved?
Well, these things everything can always be improved. I have to be honest, I haven't really been paying much attention. So if there's anything in particular you've got an issue with, just let me know.
Thank you, Chair. Manual spreadsheets, paper records were used for months, then years. At what point did reliance on manual workarounds become professionally unacceptable? And who made the decision to continue?
I have no idea, because you're talking about something that's been going back a few years now. I know that we went back to, we repopulated the new systems sometime in 2024, is that right? That's right.
We were across 2-year ends, so we were cyber attacked in December 21. We were going into doing 21-22 accounts. We had the final part of that, but it had to be done manually. The manual systems had to continue until we had a system in place. But we actually, as Declan implied, or no, stated earlier, it was like doing a full systems rebuild or transfer, but it was totally unplanned. So we had to create a new finance system from scratch, populated with the data from the old finance, what was there that we could recover. That had to go, that would be normally an 18 to 24 month project. We had to do that as quick as we did. We actually did it. We got the systems back up and running as soon as we could, with all the IT support that we had and everything else that we had and the external. That took us to February 23. We then had to validate, and this is the bit where we were doing reconciles. Everything that was paid out was reconciled through and had to be data cleansed, put into the right format to go into the new system. We had to do that. We did that strategically, month by month. We focused on 21-22 first, i.e. getting the final 4 months in. That was put into the system. That was a process that we had to reconcile every piece of data. So we had to take every transaction from the bank account and track that through. That's a hell of a lot of transactions for a council of our size. And if I wouldn't have wanted to do it with any bigger size, and we are a small council. But for an organisation of our size, it was a hell of a lot of transactions that had to be reconciled and tracked through and made sure we got them in properly. Inevitably and unfortunately, that led to the data, that whole slippage of getting accounts finalised, getting data done. We did 21-22, that got back into the system the middle of 23. We then had to rush through 2 sets of accounts, the 21-22, 22-23 accounts, because the government decided they were going to give us, they created a deadline. That was done. Our focus was changed with a very small finance team, was changed to doing that. We continued at the same time, running alongside that, pulling data together to put it in and get it back into the system, which ended back at the 22-23 data went back into the system. We got that in April, May 24, not that long ago. We've then focused on getting everything working towards getting everything reconciled, understanding the issues, etc., etc. And then we are where we are now. And thank you, Steph, because I acknowledge that comment. That we were managing to spend it out at that point in time. I've got fed up with the phrase missing money, because it's and the implication that people have been doing things untowardly. We have been working our socks off. I'm talking out of turn here, but we have. And I think everybody around here acknowledges that. So we've got to a position where we are. We're now trying to sort the situation. And we're trying to get the resources in to do that. I'll stop there.
I think that was the best response we've had, the most clearest response we've had for the whole setup. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And that was really, I'm sure members would agree with me that that was a very passionate response, and I really appreciate that. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Stephanie made about public relations throughout this last few weeks. The only thing I'd like to say really is that I did see over the Christmas period some quite congratulatory posts that were made on Facebook about great things that were happening in Gloucester, which absolutely no doubt there are great things hopefully going to be happening in the future, but it did seem a little bit tone deaf given the financial situation at the moment.
It was October.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Before then, you did not consider the figures just like nearly £400,000 per month. The next year, 25, 26, it drops considerably, and then it starts to creep up towards the 17 million figure that you talked about. So I just wonder if you could shed a little bit of light on that, why it wasn't being picked up earlier from the monthly figures, if you ever saw any monthly figures.
I learned mid-October. That's when I first found out that we had a serious problem. Because we had the 1.5 million in the summer, if you recall. And then I discovered that it was much worse. I think around about the 17th of October is the date I've got in my mind for some reason.
It's mid-October.
Yeah. So that's the first I heard as well. So, and Kim was a bit of a shock, as you can imagine.
If you looked at if the figures split down into a monthly profile, it would have been apparent, wouldn't it? Or why wouldn't it, if I've got the wrong end of the stick, that we were heading for the cliffs?
Not until I'm told, and the figures I see are quarterly, not monthly.
Why don't you get them broken down into month by month by month by month? It shows you much more detail. I'm happy just to leave that in the air, but I'll have a look at my figures again and come back to you.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the quarterly report is what we've always done. I know that's never a particularly good explanation, but they've always been sufficient in the past. So as I said, the first I knew of it was in October, and it was to do with 24-25, which was the year had already ended anyway. So it wasn't the current period's figures. So that's when we first discovered that we had a problem, and then we brought in the SIPFA experts to have a look and go through it in much detail, and then we started uncovering more. So October, November were pretty dire months, if I may say so. And in fact, right up until we told the other group leaders, when was it, in December, beginning of December, the numbers were changing practically right up until then. So it's, you know, as soon as I sort of knew maybe before everybody else, but not that much before. We were talking about maybe a week or so, but nothing more than that. Well, we further investigated to make sure we were absolutely right.
Which you can't see. We've got 10 minutes to do with another 2 items, so just keen to move on unless anybody else is desperate to say anything on the financial reports. No. No. Okay, so can I thank you, both of you, for sitting through those questions and the courtesy that you afford us all the time. Thank you so much.
And I forgot to say Happy New Year, everybody, if that's appropriate.
No, I'd just be wondering what you're going to produce at Father Christmas next year. We need to talk to Andy Lewis, I think.
I don't know, but I hope it's not the Dickensian Christmas feature that I talked about earlier.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. So are we on to the culture report? I think we are. Your moment's arrived. So while you're coming up to take your positions, can we just take the report as read? Is that okay? I think so. So can we take your report as read? No disrespect, but if there are a couple of bullet points that you're keen to get your comms release populated with, that's fine. Thanks. And then we've still got Andy Hearn on the line. So just trying to conclude before 8:30. So who wants to go first? Just a couple of bullet points, please, for your literature.
Before we start, can I just allow Nicola to introduce herself, because many of you might not have spoken to her previously.
Hi, I'm Nicola Salmon. I am just formerly the Senior Festivals and Events Officer. I've just taken on Anne-Marie's maternity cover as Cultural Development Manager for the Cultural Services. Nice to meet you.
So, as you said, Andrew, I won't go into any details about the report. I'll assume that you've all read it. You've got the main report there. You've got Appendix A, B, C, D, which delve into a bit more detail about the different aspects of the report. So feel free to fire away.
3 items, not 2. I forgot the airport.
Is this your way of saying you want to keep it really brief?
My apologies, Chair. I've realised I should mention that I am a member of the Refugee Week Working Group, and whether I should withdraw from this, I'm not sure. I don't think I should, because I'm not, there's no benefit necessarily to me, but.
Sorry, my husband's involved with the Gloucester 200. I should have mentioned that.
Thank you. I'll keep this quite brief, but I don't want to ignore all the work that you've done. So I've just got a couple of questions. So in risks in the report, it talks about not getting sponsorship, etc., etc. What extra training? Because obviously this has been a priority to get extra sponsorship in for these events ever since I remember. So, and it hasn't materialised. What sort of training or expertise has been done to try and make sure we do have that expertise and we can get this sponsorship in, because it's never managed to work. So we just want to see what's different now.
This is one of the things when I became the Cabinet Member for Culture and Leisure that the former member, Andy Lewis, discussed with me and said there's a real opportunity or a lack of opportunity at the moment to increase the amount of income and sponsorship that we can get, because we just don't have the capacity in the team to dedicate enough time to doing that. It is something that we want to improve on. However, it is a very tightly run ship in the culture team. So we are still struggling with capacity, and you can see Nicola's doing 2 jobs at the moment. But we are looking at opportunities for income generation, particularly in King's Square. We're working with Andy, with the place team, to see how we can learn from each other and support each other in driving up income. And we're also, because we're planning for the Gloucester 200 celebrations next year, we're working with partners and with Gust, the charity that's supporting us with the business case, to see how we can increase, to bring in sponsorship and raise income. So we're hoping that we'll learn a lot from doing that exercise that will benefit us for future events as well. Was there anything you wanted to add, Nicola?
Yeah, just to add that we're also members of the LAOG, which is the Local Authority Events Organising Group, which gives us access to local authorities across the country organising events. And that's giving us a place to benchmark, to ask questions, and we're now all members of that. We've got two, myself included, new members to the council, new members of offices within that team that are really keen to go and shadow. We've connected with various other regional councils to do some shadowing and find out where the opportunities are and how we can emulate some of that work that's going on in other areas.
Thank you. Just one other question. I think it still seems like it might be some way off before we can generate some income. We've got work to do, etc. I don't know whether you'll be able to answer this, or Alison's gone, but where do we stand legally? I mean, we must have had these conversations as a cabinet and as senior teams. When we're in a technical, we keep being told we're in a technical 114 position, and we're going to be revising the budget, which is going to take significant money out of vital statutory services like housing coming forward. How does that stand on still spending on cultural festival and events? Because it just seems we're on a bit of a murky place to be.
I don't believe we are making drastic cuts to housing. I think maybe Luke would be better placed to explain that, so I'm not going to even try and answer that part of the question. But I can tell you that we've already discussed in the report some elements of the festivals and event budget that are likely to be impacted when the next budget comes out. People often think culture and leisure, if you like, culture and the arts is a nice to have, it's a frivolity. It's really not. It's a little bit naive to perceive it in that way. There's a lot of benefit that's brought from having a rich cultural scene. It's important for people's sense of identity, their sense of belonging. It's important for physical and psychological health, but as well as the well-being benefits of it, it brings a lot of money into our local economy. It creates jobs. The report details the visitor spend that our events bring into the city. It talks about local businesses that, on our award-winning retro event, saw an increase of over 50% of takings on that day alone. So there are lots of financial benefits of having a cultural calendar. It's not just a nice to have, it's something that keeps our city going and keeps it thriving and keeps people in jobs. Having said that, if we were to try and cut it any more than we're already proposing to, we then get into difficulties with our funders. So towards the end of the previous administration, we committed to a 3-year funding programme with Together Gloucester, funded by Arts Council England. They've awarded us £500,000 over a 3-year period. If we were to curtail that, not only would we lose, risk our relationship with our funders, show ourselves as not being serious about providing culture for the city, we'd also be at risk of having to give that funding back, which we can't afford to do at the moment. And it would just decimate our having any kind of culture whatsoever in the city. And it would also put us on a very sticky, in a very sticky place for future funding applications, particularly for next year when we're looking to do the Gloucester 200 event to celebrate our bicentenary of the docks. So we have considered
everything when we've been looking at how we can save money and shave things off and provide a minimum level of culture, and this is the optimum that we've come up with.
And thank you. And I don't think I'm naive, and I understand all the benefits, and I understand the jobs and the footfall, etc. And Retro, being brainchild of, as sadly passed away, Colin Organ, was a fantastic thing for our city. I do understand all that, but housing is in the revised budget. I think it's about 700,000 that's being taken out of that budget. And as much as those things are all positive for everybody in this city, having sat in the portfolio for housing, and you've got people living, children living in temporary accommodation, and the downfalls where they couldn't even possibly be able to go to any of these events. All they want is a home to come to. So it is quite detrimental, and I think it's about priorities. Not that it's not important, but what are the priorities of this council? That was the point I was making.
Thank you for making your point.
Okay, can we pull in? Oh, it's 8:30. We need to take a vote to carry on for another half hour. Is that okay? Yep. Take that as yes. That's fine. Thank you. Okay. Officers don't get a vote, I don't think, today. No, I'm pretty sure they don't. Never mind. Worth a try. So, all members of the public, for that matter. So I forgot who was next. It was you, I think, and then Alistair. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. A couple of questions. First of all, I was looking down through the festivals and events that took place in 2025, and I was quite surprised that Gloucester Day wasn't mentioned.
Yeah, me too.
Does that mean that the council doesn't support Gloucester Day, either financially or otherwise? And if it doesn't support Gloucester Day, why not?
The council's always supported Gloucester Day. The reason it's not in the review of festivals and events activity is because it's not an event that the council runs. It's put on by Alan Myatt with support from the Civic Trust. The report in question is a review of the city council run events. It's mainly civic events, but there are a couple of others, such as the Gloucester Goes Retro and the Lantern Parade, which are not civic events, but ones that we not just finance, but we deliver ourselves directly.
So we don't give any financial support to Gloucester Day at all?
No, I didn't say that. I said we don't deliver that festival.
Thank you. Can I move on to Gloucester Docks 200? And we will all remember Torships 2024 that made a loss of £117,000. And what was particularly worrying about that event was not just the loss, but many families from Gloucester couldn't afford to go to Gloucester Day because it was simply too expensive for them. So I'm sure you've learned from that. I'm sure we've all learned from that. But our corporate plan talks about events, ensuring all events are inclusive and accessible to local residents. So can you give a guarantee that any event as part of Gloucester Docks 200 will be affordable and accessible to people and families who live in Gloucester?
Yes, the plan is for the vast majority of events that will come under the banner of Gloucester 200, which is the working title, will be free to people to attend. There may be some ticketed events, but they will probably be very few. The majority of it will be open access. We won't see barriers. We won't see people having to pay a ticket to enter the event space. The festival, if you want to call it that, is due to run for a number of months. It's not going to be like one weekend, like Torships Festival normally is. It's going to start in sort of late spring and continue on to the autumn. So we're looking at not only the things that the Gloucester 200 team will programme, but also events that naturally take place in the city, cultural events that other cultural organisations put on. We're inviting them to align with the theme of the bicentenary of the docks, so that all those events that people normally attend for free will become part of this big celebration of Gloucester and this significant anniversary. So yeah, there will not be anybody who is precluded from attending events for Gloucester 200 due to ticket price.
Okay, thanks. That's good to hear. And just one last question that builds on the point that Councillor Chambers made earlier. For Gloucester Docks to go ahead, I'm looking at a figure of 1.2 million, of which the City Council have committed £127,000 to. I think I've got that right. And the rest will be down to fundraising from, as we see, organisations from the Arts Council down through to trusts and foundation trusts and what have you. I have to say, and as I said, it builds on the point that was made earlier, £127,000 is an awful lot of money when the City Council is in financial trouble and there are essential services that the council need to deliver that really we should be looking at. So, and you've made a comment on that. My other concern is if the amount of funding doesn't come in, and I'm just looking at, I think there were different bands here, gold, silver, and I assume bronze. If that doesn't come in, at what stage do you downsize the event? And what does that look like before you say, well, hang on, is it actually worth it? And, being totally honest with you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These are targets and there's no guarantee that those targets will be met. We're hopeful that they will, but that's why the planning has been done on this gold, silver, bronze basis, is we have to plan for worse outcomes than the ones we're hoping for. Because we don't want to be in a situation again when we're looking at a loss of over 100,000 on an event. So we're planning our contingency in at this stage while we're applying for funding, so that if we only meet, say, half our target, we scale it back to this. So we make sure that as we're planning and booking things, we have get out options, that we haven't committed to something that we don't have the money for. So essentially what will happen is the only things that will happen are things that we have the money for. We won't be putting it on anyway and hoping that the income eventually comes in. So we'll only be spending what we've got, not what we're hoping to get.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, that was Councillor Alistair Chambers, and then Anne Radley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. You mentioned that you're only going to be spending what you've got and what you're not hoping to get. So on that basis, can you give assurances that the Culture Department will not lose money this year?
The event's due to happen next year, so in 2027. So we're currently in the 25 to 26 financial year. So is your question relevant to that?
Okay, to clarify the question, can you give assurances that events won't make a loss this year and also next financial year?
This financial year, we're currently on track to finish the year within budget. So yes, we're confident that we won't be making a loss this financial year. I would hope and would feel confident that it will be the same position next year, especially given the measures that I've just explained to Councillor Pullen about how we're making sure that our spending is controlled and is. I always get this wrong. We cut our cloth according to our. I shouldn't have gone there, should I? I got it completely wrong. You know what I mean. We cut our cloth accordingly.
Should we find ourselves in a position where, unfortunately, culture does make a loss or overspends, would you be giving apologies to the members of the public, given that homelessness is being cut and children's services are being cut? Would you look forward to, would you propose that you'll do that in the future if you're wrong?
I think I'd have to understand the reasons for any overspend to see whether an apology is required.
With homelessness budget being cut, children in services, in temporary accommodation, costs also being cut, and money being spent for events, when obviously it's not deemed as a statutory requirement for the council, would you think it would be prudent for you to offset some of the budget to put towards protecting children in temporary accommodation rather than hosting events which have proven to make a loss year on year?
I think if that even was a possibility, then we would have examined that already. But as I said, a lot of our the majority of our funding for festival events is tied into the Together Gloucester scheme, and we can't reallocate Arts Council England money to other services. They have to go on culture. And if we were to withdraw our part of it, we'd then have to return the funding we've already received. So we'd actually be in a worse financial position if we tried to withdraw our funding.
So if there's opportunity to withdraw funding that's not going to affect arts councils and put that funding into impoverished children in temporary accommodation and homeless people living on our streets, would you look at that before the budget is set this coming year?
I believe the Recovery Board are already looking at the options for diverting funding to the frontline services and protecting them as much as possible. I don't think any decision has been made that favours culture over other frontline services. So I'm going with that as that's already been looked at.
Unfortunately, you're mistaken. The Recovery Board has not been set up yet, as I'm on the Recovery Board.
Okay. Perhaps I used the wrong terminology there then. The people who are looking at the budget.
Given that you used the wrong terminology and you're obviously mistaken in that respect, would you therefore, going forward, seeing as you've got 5 months till budget, take a view on looking at spending more money on children's services, passing some money on to the children impoverished in housing conditions that are unfit for the residents in our city, and look at helping homeless people get off the streets rather than spending money on what has proven year on year to be a loss-leading exercise of culture that fails our city, costs taxpayers money, and doesn't serve homeless and vulnerable people? Would you take a view on re-looking at the budget, yes or no?
As I've already answered, I don't believe that's in my remit, but I will refer to the Cabinet and the officers as to whether those things have been considered already, which I'm sure they have.
Your Cabinet portfolio member, the holder of it, you do have that jurisdiction, you can look at it, so I'll take that as a no.
You can take that as a, I'll look into it.
We've got to move on. Okay, Alistair, do you have any more questions or comments? Councillor Chambers? Sorry, do you have any more questions or comments?
Thank you. I'm thankful that the member's going to look into personally checking that homeless people and vulnerable children are going to be looked into first, holding a party. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, that's cool, thanks. Okay, is that the end of the list? So we've got Anne again, and then Steph. And I'm not sure what happens at 9 o'clock if we haven't got through everything. Do we take another vote, or how does that work? Because we've got a very important piece of work on the hotel and the loan.
So in the Constitution, there is no limit on ONS meetings in the same way that there is council. So in theory, you can go on as long as you need.
I'll try and do a better job of moving people along. So who did I say was next? Anne, you're usually pretty to the point, so if we could do it again.
Thank you. I'll try and keep that reputation. My question was regarding Together Gloucester. I'd like to understand a little bit about how it relates to the city. I appreciate there are different strands of it. There's the King's Fund area and there's the Bright Nights, which are going out into the community. So in terms of the whole of Gloucester, do we have groups that are taking part evenly across the city?
Yeah, we have loads of applicants to the Together Gloucester funding. And that's one of the real successes of this scheme is that previously I heard from people that the funding for culture events always goes to the same people. It's always the same events that we see every year. And it was felt that a lot of people missed out, and a lot of communities were overlooked, and didn't seem to be able to get a I'm not going to go with the analogies. We're not able to get a look in, basically, to put their events on. So we do see a lot more diversity now in our cultural calendar. And actually, it means that there's stuff going on all the time. And that's one of the things that struck me when I became cabinet member, is that there is stuff going on all the time. And I try and attend as many as I can. But yes, it does go out to neighbourhoods. It's not all just city centre. It's not just King Square and the docks. There are events going on in Tredworth, events going on in Matson, in Podsmead, in loads of our wards. And we always get way more applicants than we're able to fund, sadly, which is a shame. But it's also good that there is that much interest and enthusiasm for it, because it's, you know, it's making sure that everybody in the city gets to enjoy and to attend things that mean something to them and reflect their community and their values. So yeah, it's worked well so far.
And just to add to that, within the citizen panel, as Caroline said, there's more applicants for more money than we have to issue. One of the balancing criteria within that citizens panel is to ensure that there's a balance across the city. So we wouldn't approve applications that all happened in the city centre, for example.
Okay, thanks. So if we can move on, we've got Steph Chambers, then Angela Condor. If you could please keep your questions a little bit snappy, and also the replies, please, Councillor and your colleague. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the Cabinet, you weren't aware that in the new revised budget that we're going to be looking at, I got the figures wrong myself, but it's 482,000 that have been taken from the housing budget. And the latest figures that I have in regards to the culture and leisure, which are mid-December, show that you're going to be 28,000 in deficit at the end of this year, where you said you're on track. Do you think you're fully informed as a cabinet member, and what involvement are you having in regards to the financial crisis and the recovery of this financial crisis? If you weren't aware, what your budget is something like 1 million or something this year. Housing's losing 482 and you weren't aware. So what involvement are you having? Are you fully informed as a cabinet?
The question was about festival and events. You're talking about perhaps cultural services as a whole, but the festival and events part of culture and services is on track to meet, to come in within budget. Regarding the housing, I mean, we're not really here to talk about that, but my understanding of that is that we're not looking to cut services, it's just they're going to be funded in slightly different ways. But I don't claim to know the detail of how Luke's, Councillor Shervy's portfolio is funded completely. I'm briefed enough on the culture and services budget to be able to confirm what I've just said to you there.
Thank you, but I find it very difficult to believe that 500,000 can be taken from a housing budget and there'd be no impact. And I think that's very important that the whole of the Cabinet are aware that if you're spending X amount on culture and services, which isn't a statutory service, what is going to suffer because of that?
I suggest you put your question to Councillor Shervy about the housing. I'm sure he'd be very happy to explain it to you.
Okay, so I think the last speaker is Angela. Snappy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. Remembering the last Tall Ships event, the ticketing process, I believe, gave a discount to families, but it wasn't apparent until you actually pushed buy or whatever, and I never got to that stage. So my impression was that it was going to cost my family a lot more than it actually would have done. And I also remember the shambles around the barriers, which side of the barrier you were on. But we also spoke to people who were running a food stall of some sort, And my recollection was that they found it barely viable for them. So, can you give reassurances that you'll look at, I don't know how that element is funded, whether they pay you a certain amount or you take a proportion of their takings. But can you assure us that it will be, a fair deal for them, so that they will come and offer, a good range of fast food for people there?
Yeah, no. Sorry, just saying that we don't know how the food stalls will be run, but as we said earlier, it would be a very different event that wouldn't be ticketed. So that those barriers, and not necessarily one big event where there would be those opportunities. So, but much like Retro, where we have had good reports from each of our traders of making, we'd make sure that was a fair deal.
Okay, that's really good. So one last question on this from me. I didn't quite understand the answer to Terry Pullen about Gloucester Day, why we're not supporting it, why we don't do anything to support Gloucester Day. Can you just remind me what you said?
I said we have always supported Gloucester Day. We have provided funding for Gloucester Day. I was just explaining it's not in this report because it's not a festival or event that we deliver.
Okay, that's a really good answer. Thank you so much. Complete short session with us. Thank you very much. Hope it wasn't too painful. So now we've got Mr. Hearn. So which report is going to be the quickest to take through? The airport? Okay, let's deal with that, please. Okay, Mr. Hearn and Councillor Hilton, can you update us on the airport? What's happening there? Yeah, that's all we need to know, please, because we still got some scrutiny work to do at the airport. Joint meeting with Cheltenham.
As you know, the council made a decision and agreed to sell the airport. We're in discussions, due diligence discussions with a potential buyer. And that's progressing, possibly slower than we would like, but it's progressing. And the communication between ourselves, Cheltenham Borough Council and the buyer are productive, and they're communicating on a regular basis. So we're confident we're moving forward. But as with all of these things, sometimes they take longer and you're in negotiations. Just like I said before, sometimes when you're buying a house, it takes longer than you thought it was. But I think Andy can give you an update. He's in communications with various people that are involved. I'm just being briefed on occasion about the progress that we're making.
Blocks, there are very many. Are there several? Not many at all. Just one main one. What's the score?
Yeah, I can put a bit more detail to it, a bit more fabric. So up until probably about the 15th of November, communication was largely between Jane, who's in my team, and others. Obviously, the sad passing of Paul in Cheltenham has meant that Gareth has had to step in as the chief exec of Cheltenham. I've also then stepped in to provide some senior support. In that time, we've had a joint person meeting, which is a roundtable session with the buyer. So myself, Gareth, and the team from Cheltenham, and the buyers and the buyer's agent, we met on the 27th of November, where we had a very productive 2-hour meeting, 2-hour session. I would say it was a very open, very transparent session. It certainly reassured me, having come into this quite late on, having heard a lot of scepticism. The buyer themselves were very open about some of the noise in the media, and they were very quick to dispel some of that as well. They updated us, particularly on their funding position. They gave reassurance as to where they're seeking their funding from. And I have to say at this point, whilst I can't give details of where that funding is coming from, because that would be a breach of sensitive information, there are a number of different funders that the buyer is engaging in, largely to provide contingency within their investment parameters so that they've got a platform of investment they can draw on. And it comes down to them to choose which one is best for them. But I was very reassured by the conversation and by some of the information that I was seeing physically in that meeting. We also agreed that we would have regular communication throughout the festive period, which has been taking place. I've had 3 meetings with the buyers while I've been on leave, just to make sure that there's pace and progress being made. I've been assured that there are still positive discussions being taken place with the potential investors. The buyer has also sent a rather long email, but a confident email to ourselves and to Cheltenham, setting out pretty much where they are with the current discussions, which again, for obvious reasons, I can't disclose, but again, it provided a lot of reassurance. The backstop for us that we've agreed with the buyer is that we want this transaction to be closed by the end of January. That is the date that we are working to, that is the date that they are working to, and it's the date that I'm confident at this point that they will continue to achieve. And I've got no reason at this point to believe that they are deviating from that.
That's the end of January. What happens if they haven't produced the, they haven't signed on the dotted line? Does the city in Cheltenham just walk away?
No, we'll have to see. I'm keen to see certainly over the next 2 weeks. I want to see pressure put in the right places. We need to keep the pace, which is what we've been saying to the buyer over the Christmas period. We don't want lag, which is why transparency is key. We need to be really, really open as parties, as 3 parties. If they feel that there is any risk to their funding position over the course of the next 2 weeks, we and Cheltenham need to know about it on the day rather than hearing about it on the 30th of January so that we can make a prudent decision. We are prudently looking at alternative options, but that's not because we believe there's risk, that's just because it's sensitive to do so. And it would be irresponsible of us to not start looking at what a plan B might look like. I also met with the board of the airport recently, and I was asked that same question. So that work has started to happen. But at this point in time, I don't have any reason to believe that this deal won't transact. And I'm very confident in the information and the transparency, more importantly, that I'm being given by the buyer themselves.
You've been very straight with us. That's really good. Thanks. Any questions, comments? No, thank you for that. So then the next one we asked to talk to you guys about is the hotel loan, which was talking. We have a pre-meeting before we started at 6. I think that agreement, which you said was dated 2022, was used to virtually all of us, not quite all of us, but virtually all of us. So I saw on the forward plan that there was an item going to cabinet on IHG hotel loan. I had no idea what it was about, and I thought it was just going to be a pretty straightforward report, but it's far from that, isn't it? It's far from that. It's far from just a straightforward report. Might be for you, that's the day job, but for those of us whose day job is something different, it's not. So do you want to say a few words on that, please, Andy? And then we'll take questions and comments. Jeremy?
Yeah, just to say that, to start off with, this is really a report which is a tidying up exercise for the decision that was made in June 2022 when we agreed the general process of how we would work through to operate the hotel that we're expecting to open in February. There was a couple of things in the original report that were missing. That's why the reason why we're bringing this here today, or to the next cabinet meeting. I do apologise for it coming in late, but the report was being drafted over the Christmas period. We put it in the forward plan not long after we had a cabinet briefing about the issue, and I wasn't able to release it until this morning, until the cabinet had been fully briefed by 11 o'clock. That's when it was issued, when the cabinet had seen the report and the cabinet was happy to take it forward. It provides the working capital for the hotel from day one, It's a £4 million drawdown facility, which we provided by the Public Works Loan Board. It doesn't mean that they necessarily have to draw down the 4 million. It might just be £1 million in the first instance. And in effect, we'll be getting a sort of brokerage fee because if they were to borrow the full £4 million over the period, that would give us a fee in the payback of £82,000. And there's also the rental income that we'll get at £500,000 per annum. So what we're providing is this 4-star hotel in Gloucester with 129 beds. We're just providing the working capital so that from day one, we can cover the cost of staff, we can cover supplies and all those sort of things. And over a period of the next couple of years, that hotel should then work into profit. But as soon as they draw down the loan, we will charge them 3.5% above base rates, and they will be paying back that loan. And it depends on what they draw down. So it might just be £1 million in the first year, and it might be the business. I suppose the faster the hotel goes into profit, the less money they'll need to draw down. But this is working capital to get this hotel up and running.
I'm conscious of your time, but I can give more detail if it's helpful, just to put some context around it, but I'll leave it to members. It's up to you.
Thank you. So comments, questions?
Yeah, because there's a wonderful sweeping statement on the first paragraph to say that this funding is to make sure the company is fully equipped to meet pre-opening and early operational requirements. Could you expand on what that means, please? It's a great statement, but what does that mean? What's that about?
Sure. So just for context, I'm going to assume, rightly or wrongly, that everyone in the room knows what a management company is, or a ManCo for short. If you don't, I'm happily explain it. But effectively, that was what was agreed in 2022. Predates me by a long way. But the decision that was taken at the time was to set up a wholly owned subsidiary so that the hotel could be operated by the council. So the management company is what will take the operational liability for the hotel running in agreement and shareholder partnership agreement with IHG, who is the operator. Okay, so that's what we're referring to when we say it was approved in 2022. That paper that was approved in 2022 set out all of the legal and operational procedural elements that needed to be achieved to set up a management company. It's not a new policy. The council already has a couple of these in place anyway. You have one for the docks, and you have a King's Quarter estate management company as well that looks after some of the other estates. So it's common practice to do so. The benefits of doing so are commercial pace, mitigation around procurement, HR, etc. Whereas if you're tied into public service, you have to follow certain public sector rules and regulations. So what that sweeping statement that Terry's referring to is the hotel will be owned by the council and will be operated by IHG. Now, when it's mobilising, the hotel is not going to make a profit from day one. It'd be impossible to assume that it would. So what it needs is its mobilisation, operational expenditure loan, to make sure that it can apply its fixtures, apply its fittings, apply its soft furnishings, recruit its staff, train its staff, put everything in place to make it operable for 2 years, which is what the cash flow register, which is what the assumptions baked into the appraisal set out. That's what it says it needs in order for it to become profitable, is a 2-year mechanism. So to Jeremy's previous point, the £4 million loan is a backstop provision. It's not a guaranteed use. It might not be 4 million. We can't guarantee what it will cost at this point, and neither can IHG. But what we do know is that in their cash flow, it is projected quite clearly and quite evidently that they will start to make a profit by year 2, which is why in 27-28, I've got it baked into the commercial information for our budgeting purposes that we start to receive our first annualised rent of 500,000. So that loan, that drawdown period, is purely for the hotel to become operational and to pay all of the upfront OPEX costs, not capital, OPEX costs, to be able to mobilise and in effect open in February, as per the original agreed date. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that. You state that all liability will be held with the management company. Is that correct? So what happens if the management company goes bust? Who still picks up the £4 million bill?
Well, it's a wholly owned company by the council, so the liability still sits with the council.
So ultimately, it's the council still at risk. The management company's irrelevant, really.
The management company is there as a platform. That's it. All that management company is doing is allowing you to operate more like a commercial entity, more like the private sector. It's giving you more flexibility to do so. Not my decision to do it. That was a decision taken in 2022 by a previous administration when the report was done and when it was signed off. But for the record, I think Mancos can work, management companies can work. I think if you can operate it more like a commercial entity, you've got more flexibility to make it work and drive it, sweat the asset, then actually you will get a better yield from it. But on this basis, yes, the risk does sit with the management company, and therefore, if it does fail, it goes back to the council. But that said, there was a decision taken, again, during the design process, there was a decision taken to upgrade the design detail of this hotel from a 3-star operating hotel to a 4-star IHG branded hotel, one of the top tier hotels in the country, who are currently performing in the top 5 in the country. So actually, all of the work that everyone in this room has done to date over the last 6 or 7 years to get to this point has made all of the right decisions, have put all of the steps in place to make sure that you've got a successful 4-star hotel. This is really just the final hurdle. And unfortunately, the reason we're here today is because in the document that was done in 2022, it just didn't mention that there would be a loan. That's it.
Thank you for clearing that up. With regards to, you said it was done, predated your time, and this was something that you possibly wouldn't have done that way. How would you have done it differently?
I just said to you, for the record, I think it is a good use of management company. I think for public sector, I mean, I've got a background in the private sector, but I think for public sector bodies, use of management companies are effective because they can allow you to commercially sweat the asset.
So to be clear, you would have done it the same way?
Yeah. If I had the information at the time and I was here, I certainly wouldn't have opposed against it. No.
Thank you. So if KQ Hotel Management Company number 2 fails, will the council still have to service the PWLB debt?
Because it's a wholly owned subsidiary, if they default on the loan, then it falls back to the council to pay the PWRB loan.
Sorry. Just to be clear as well, if the management company fails, it's because you're assuming that IHG have failed, because the only way the management company can fail is if IHG, the brand, fails. So the first point of call there is not to assume failure of the management company and therefore an immediate repayment of the loan and a loss of income. It's to go out and attract a new operator. But given that IHG have pumped so much time and effort and money into being in Gloucester, they believe that this is the right investment for them. And given their credibility as a brand, I think it's highly unlikely in this case that they're going to be a failing hotel.
Thank you. Would the council absorb all staffing liabilities as well?
Provision for staffing and recruitment. The cost liability for staffing and recruitment sits with the management company, but the operational liability sits with IHG. The terms of how that would disperse, should they change, it would probably end up in a 2P situation if it was to move over to another company, but that's something that the IHG shareholder agreement would have to acknowledge.
Couple more, Chair, that's all. The report highlights projected income of 982,000 over 20 years, which is divided by the 20 years, you're looking at 49,000 on the interest. Can officers explain why this ignores inflation, ignores opportunity cost, and ignores the probability weighted risk of default?
So the loan would be taken out on for 20 years on a fixed term interest, so it would be taken out fixed. So there wouldn't be any fluctuation in the interest rate. It'll be fixed. So it'll be fixed. We will take out a fixed PWLB loan, and then the loan to the Manco would be fixed at the higher interest rate.
Thank you. On that basis, if the council can borrow from the Public Works Loan Board at 5.54%, why can a wholly owned company with no trading history not secure commercially finance directly without council exposure?
I'm not quite sure what your question means, but we are giving a loan to the Manco, and we have to give that loan on a commercial basis. That's the advice that we've had, the legal advice. So that's why the interest rate is higher than the PWLB rate.
Can officers explain how the headline figure of 50 million rent over 30 years is credible when rent's deferred till 2027, 2028, and further rent periods, free rent periods have already been granted?
I don't know what you're reading there, but there's a 2-year rent-free period that's been applied, which takes you to 2027, not 2037.
No, 2027.
Okay.
2028.
Yeah.
There's further rent-free periods have been granted.
No, there hasn't. The report states that you've got 2 years rent-free, which was the point at which the lease was signed, which actually was in 2023, which means that the extension has only been granted from 25 to 27. It's not a new rent-free period. It's just accounting for the delays to the forum and the opening of the hotel. So actually, you've still got 30 years. You've got 30 years of a base rent of 500,000. That's a base rent provision, not including the interest payment on top. Plus, after 3 years, so at 28, 29, the council has the ability under the lease structure to start taking dividends, should it wish to do so.
Did you just say that the rent-free periods on the basis that the forum delayed was a delay? Yeah, okay, I thought there was previously been explained to by Cabinet that there was no penalties for delay, which we've learned today that was actually incorrect. Thank you for that. Thank you.
When you say you've learned there was no delays, what do you mean?
Several times we've asked if there's been a delay in the forum has cost financially, if there's been a delay in an overrun that's meant that there's been any triggers for rent-free periods, and we've been told there hasn't been, and it was all on target, and there was no financial retention concerns or any liquidated damages. But obviously that isn't the case, so thanks for clearing that up. Thank you.
I don't know where you're getting your information, but it's highly inaccurate because there were LADs, they're provisions within the contract. They're also part of the pre-construction agreement, which I set out in a council question. Irrelevant to that, there's also been a request that a full review of the forum project comes to ONS, so a report is currently being requested. And I've also had a further request for information from Councillor Stephanie Chambers, which sets out similar email information requested. So I'm sure all of the detail will be in that, but a lot of it is actually not suitable for public audience. But in terms of LAD position, I think we discussed that at the last council meeting, that LADs were provided, and I'm very happy to have a more offline conversation with you and show you what was in them.
Yeah, no, thank you for advising about liquidated damages. I did notice that in one of the public questions. I think maybe one of the people in the public here did ask the question, but it was more around that we've suffered financially as a direct result of it overrunning. You said that there had to be rent-free periods, so that's something else extra to liquidated damages. Obviously, liquidated damages when the contractors failed to meet the contract deadline, and they've got damages associated with that, which is set out in the JCT formal contract. I understand that. Well, or whatever contract that's been held. But with regards to that, the 2 years rent-free periods additional to that, which is quite a concern, and we were told, I was told, documented in the council under, not by yourself, but under the Cabinet, that was not the case. So, thank you.
I think just for the record, we should be really clear on the information that we're telling there. Because when we're talking about LADs and what LADs cover, they don't just cover, it's not a JCT for a start, it's a development agreement and a full construction agreement. And LADs do cover revenue loss. what they can't do is justify the full degree of an expected revenue loss because it is done at the pre-start of a development and construction agreement. It doesn't account for everything. As I said, I'm going to set all of this out in a full report for ONS at some point once we've managed to get to a final position of account closure.
Was the contract to design and build as well?
Okay. So, Alistair, we've got other people wanting to speak. But it's still 1:30 this afternoon or 2 o'clock even. I can't remember when they dropped into the inbox, but it's a huge issue.
Andrew, let's get it straight. We had the cash flow forecast around October, I think, from IHG, which basically said what working capital they needed to start operating the report. We had a briefing by Cabinet in the middle of December about the basics of this, and the report was drafted up. As soon as we put it on the forward plan, it was immediately asked that it come to this committee. And we can't write a report before it's written. It was written over the Christmas period. Myself and my deputy leader got a sight of the draft on Friday, and we then arranged for the cabinet to have a briefing on Monday morning to sign it off before it was published. It couldn't have been done any quicker than that. And you need to understand that just because something goes into the public domain, if necessary, you just demand that something goes on the agenda. If we haven't got it done in time, we haven't got it done in time. And it's nothing to do with ignoring Scrutiny's request. It's just a fact it takes time. It took time, and it's a very comprehensive report and a very solid report. And that's the important thing. Of course, Scrutiny could have looked at after. We need to also make sure that the hotel opens on time in February. So it was critical that this decision was made. It was when we were getting the cash flow forecast that we looked at the decisions made in 2022, and we realised that the council and the cabinet didn't have the authority to agree to this loan facility, and it had to go back to cabinet. If the cabinet in 2022 had given that responsibility to the officers, it would have been, we would not have needed to do that. So that's the reason why we're where we are. But what we need to do is get this going, get this hotel open. It will be a great asset for the city of Gloucester. The first 4-star hotel we've got right next to the railway station, right next to the bus station, right next to a multi-storey car park, brand new one. Right in the King's Quarter area, an area of the city that we want to regenerate. We are going to have lounges move in at the same time, right next to it in King's House. We're making progress. But things don't always work in that pattern. It's just like the airport one, things don't always work on the exact time period that you would want. And this is the reason why we've had this one. I'm sorry we couldn't get the report to you any earlier, but I wasn't going to release it until my cabinet had been fully briefed by these two officers so that they knew what they were letting themselves in for and what they were going to agree on I think it's the 14th of January, isn't it? Yeah, so they needed to see it before anybody else. And then you had it was published immediately after.
Okay, I don't know the timeline, the way you shared it with your colleagues and all the rest of it, but everybody knew when Scrutiny was. And Andy, I'm not going to ask for the timeline when who said what to who. All I know is at 1:30 in the afternoon. It really is having a giraffe at our expense to produce such a complicated document. And that's why we're here at 9:15. So I think you were the next speaker, Tree.
Yeah, thank you. I have a bit of concern about this, really. Hospitality is not great at the moment. The hotel business is even trickier, quite frankly. What is our plan B? Yeah, we should be learning from the speculation that we've made over other things, that stuff doesn't run to plan, stuff goes wrong, but it seems like maybe we're taking a very overly positive view to this. Yeah, I know from family experience within the hotel trade that it's very difficult to attract a different company to take on management and things like that. So what is our plan B? If something happened and the company that will be our management, it's managing the hotel on our behalf, it's IHG, isn't it? If something happened and they said, no, we can't do it, or you're saying it's going to take 2 years for them to turn a profit, if it takes longer than that, what's our plan B?
Thank you. So there's a couple of swim lanes there. Firstly, from a legal point of view, we are in a contract with IHG. They can't just tuck tail and run. They can't just bail. So we have protections in place to make sure that that can't be the case. Like any share agreement, they can't just bail on us and say, we're not doing this anymore. There is a partnership agreement in place, which means that we have to work with them, hence with the management company being set up. I think in local government, from my world, I'm quite used to working very much in partnership with brands and with big companies. Local government takes a very much transactional view to it, in my view. We can't do that here. We have to work in partnership with IHG. We have to understand their business model, what's making them work. If they are struggling, we have to be quite clear as to why and how that's going to be, how we're going to help that. But at the end of the day, if you were going to put your money on any hotel operator right now, IHG are a very solid bet. They've got a huge diverse portfolio. They've got 200 hotels, branded hotels across the country. Okay, I don't disagree with you, Councillor Trudy Bruce, that actually the hospitality market has shifted. F&B market fell out of its backside about 3 years ago. But the reality is that the council made a decision 7 years ago to invest over £100 million in a multi-mixed use regeneration scheme that had grade A office space, Cat B, Cat A office space, residential and a hotel. You've built that hotel, you've done all the horsework, everything is there. It is too late to back out now. That hotel is up, built and ready to open. And now what you have to do is take off the local government hat, put on the asset management hat and sweat that asset to within an inch of its life and make sure it actually works. Take an asset management view and really make that asset work. Because if it doesn't, you will end up with a failed asset. Okay? IHG, big brand, big capital, huge amount of respect and credibility in the industry. So actually, I'm very confident in what they can achieve. Okay, despite what the public noise might be, because there's no one that's professional in the public audience, in the hospitality or hotel market. So actually, if you look at regionally, hotel market isn't booming like London. Okay, average daily rate is lower, granted, but in our area, in the southwest, the hotel rate is actually much better. That's ADR, that's average daily rate. Our average daily rate in this area, geographically, is much better. We've recently just had a hotel demand study done. That was done in September, I think it was October. That was done by a really credible consultancy company. That hotel demand analysis didn't just say that this area is still incredibly strong for its current market. It also suggested that Gloucester city centre has got the capacity for another hotel in and around the docks area, should we want to invest and develop, or should we want to push that out to bring in private sector investment. So actually, all of the narrative is pointing towards it's still a strong investment, but the reality is you're already where you are. The hotel is built. There is no option now to back out of it. And if IHG, for some reason, in 2-3 years' time decided this wasn't for them, then we'll have to go back out to market and find another operator.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for explaining. I think a lot of the frustration has come in relation to the timing of this report. And I think to say that the report in 2022 missed giving the authority. I think it would have been wrong to give them the authority, particularly since you said the cash flow forecast wasn't received till the end of this year from IHG, so we didn't know how much and what they were going to be needing, which was really important to know. So yes, this did need to be done. Again, this links back to a little bit of communications, because it looks very, very bad optics when a couple of weeks ago we're going, gosh, we're in financial trouble, we've got to go to the government for a bailout, and now, oh, we're going to loan this money. So that those optics look really bad. And despite the report not being ready, we have group leaders meetings, we could have had conversations about this, particularly in relation to, we're in a financial crisis, actually this is coming up, it's not going to look good, but obviously it's not necessarily, well, we do have a gun to our head and we do need to complete, but this is the long-term plan. There's lots of benefits of this working and happening. So I understand that. But again, it's just the communications of it. The other concerns are, this MANCO was set up in 2023. Now, I sit on a MANCO with GDECOR and another one for King's Square. And with the GDECOR one, particularly because it's been operating for quite some time, but, you know, we have members of the council on there, the leader of the council, we have business representation, and we have residents representation. The governance of this MANCO is not strong enough, and that should have been dealt with in the meantime. To the managing director and the director of this council is not enough to put good governance in place. So that strongly needs to be looked at. Also, just another technical point, the social value point of this report details with social value that came from the build of this project. It doesn't deal with the social value of what this hotel and this loan, the ongoing works of the hotel and what that's going to bring. The delays to this project are really unfortunate, because I've just checked online and I think you can book this hotel from April 19th of April, when Cheltenham Races is running in the 10th of March. So the delays have lost us. There's nearly £300 million income into the local area from Cheltenham Races, and we've missed out on that opportunity with these delays. So that's really unfortunate. And obviously Gloucester will start to take some of that money by having a 4-star hotel in the future. So that's a little bit unfortunate. I think that's most of my points covered for now. So really, what were the delays and why can't we book until the 19th? The governance, is that going to be improved? And the social value and the communications on this.
I mean, just on the 2 points, the reason you can't book it in March is because it's already fully booked. So you could book it, but they're fully booked because of Cheltenham. So that's really positive. The delays, the side of it, I've been here 11 months. The forum has had historical major issues as a development. Okay, stuff that we'll go into when we go through our proper procedures through ONS, but stuff we've talked about in previous as well. You know, technical delays, you know, gas pipeline delays, you know, service delays, contract. There's all sorts of things that have affected this delay, this project, notwithstanding and pinning everything else on the fact that you ran a major project, a major development through the turbulence of COVID, through the turbulence of market dropout. Like, I mean, I'm not being funny. If you were going to pick a point to start running £100 million project, it couldn't have been worse timing. Not for anyone in here's fault, because you've got no glass ball. So I get that. But, you know, there's been a lot of things gone wrong that were completely outside of anybody's control that have meant that there are delays. And actually, having sat with some of the biggest companies in the country, I can tell you, the delay that we are experiencing on the forum, whilst it is frustrating, and it is not as big as what it could have been if there hadn't been some really, really good work, not just by officers, and that's not me because I wasn't here, but not just by officers, but by the development team and by the contractor. The work that was gone on there has been fundamentally important to getting us to where we are today. And I can't take no credit for that, but people who were here before me can.
Can I just say, I think this, I've always supported the forum development from the opposition benches. And I'm really pleased that we're getting to the end of this process. And I think members of this council should be celebrating the completion of the forum. And hopefully they'll celebrate the opening of the hotel. And of course, I think one of the things we probably all felt in the past when somebody said, oh, I want to come to Gloucester, what's the best hotel to go and stay at? And we think, well, it's the Premier Inn. The Premier Inn's all right if it's a market, but we've not had a 4-star hotel ever before. And that's going to be really good, because at least I can say, go there, it's great. It's only so much per night. And the people that want to come here will go there. As we've heard already, that it's fully booked for the races. That's really good news already. And I do wish the leader of the Conservative group be a bit more positive about things in Gloucester and not so negative about everything. I know she's struggling to be an opposition leader and she feels she's got to be negative.
It's 9:30, Councillor. It's 9:30. If you want to go off on a rant, we'll just close the meeting and we'll all go home. So come back to answering the questions.
I'm just about to answer the question.
Answer the questions that have been put to you. Thank you.
But I am answering the question. And I'm making a point, because a political point was made by the leader of the Conservative group. As far as the boards of directors of GDECL, the King's Quarter, and this management company as well, the Cabinet in discussing this report this morning also agreed that we should have a review of what we're doing and how we're managing the 3 mancos and how we fill out the ball places. So we'll be doing that anyhow. So that's good news for you, isn't it?
Beth, do you want us to make those comments that you were making as our response to Cabinet when we feed back to Cabinet? Are there any other comments or questions? Anne, did you have your hand out? I can't remember. Do you still want to speak? Pardon? Yes, please. Yes, cool.
Thank you, Chair. So it sounds to me like we've booked our flight, packed our case, planned our itinerary, and forgotten to buy the bus ticket. And we're having the conversation now about putting in place a necessary step to get us to where we want to be. And that's important. And I'm also heartened to hear that the overview of this company will be strengthened, because we know from our previous experience with Aspire that there was a lack of information transfer and that led to bad things. So I'm really pleased that that's being looked at. But it feels to me like we've already made this decision as a council and we're now just catching up with the decision that's previously been actioned. But it's right and proper that we look at the risks and we appropriately say, yes, we do actually want to get here. We do want to finish it off. So my comment really is, in essence, we've already made this decision. We just got to get on and do it.
You're absolutely right. We're buying the bus ticket from the airport to the hotel we're staying at. That's what we're doing. It's the end of the process, and we've got to really we've got to do that decision. And as far as the governance, it does need strengthening, and that's why we think we need to review the 3 of them and see what the governance structures are and how they can best be improved, because I sit on the GDECL one and I think that could be improved as well. So we need to look at all 3 at the same time and have some consistency in the approach. I don't think that's the case at the moment. So that's another thing that the administration needs to fix.
Andy, did you want to come back?
I was just going to, I think Steph also had a question about social value. I was just going to say, I was just reading it and I agree. So I think what we'll do is we'll review the report and we'll put in the elements of the hotel, because it doesn't actually mention it in here. So I'll pick that up.
With those recommendations from Councillor Stephanie Chambers, are we okay to move on, going through to Cabinet with the report? Steph, yeah.
I do just want to address, and I know you said about, I am very positive. That's why we worked on this as an administration to bring back some regeneration to the city centre, and I think it is coming to fruition. My point about the frustration is with this, as you could have brought this to us as group leaders, because it is bad optics, and we could have dealt with it in a lot better way. So that was my point. You're in a position of no overall control. We need to work together on projects that we all jointly supported, and despite that report not being signed off by Cabinet, you still could have spoken to everybody about this and made it less of an issue today.
It's a point for these guys to think about. If you can, please. Okay, so are we able to move on?
Leaders
Are
have
we
been
able
able to
to move
discuss
on?
it
Committee,
today.
are we able to move on? Getting nod to agreement all around the room? Yep. Okay, so can I close the meeting? Thank you all for attending. It's been a long meeting. Sorry? Okay, cool. The work plan. So, Steph, we spoke the other day. Do you want to quickly outline your idea? These are all going, they're getting out. Do you want to outline your idea of a housing cluster programme?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just, there was a little bit of frustration. There were quite some meaty reports all coming up in the March Cabinet that we as a committee will end up being here this long again, because there's the renters review, there's the home seeker policy, lots of other things that I did outline to you. So it was just about Cabinet working more closely with Scrutiny to think about how they bring these reports through, and maybe we cluster and have a housing and rent, etc. overview and scrutiny with a theme through it, which I think was also a recommendation when they did the LGA review previously.
Okay, can I try and close the meeting again?
Yep.
And Kate, sorry, I thought you weren't here.